Are you searching for a deeper understanding of your faith?
Inspiring Philosophy is your go-to resource for exploring the rich tapestry of Christian thought.
From biblical archaeology to philosophy of mind, we dive into the topics that matter.
Our content bridges faith and understanding, offering insights into God's existence and the reliability of the New Testament.
Join a community where faith meets reason and discover the answers you've been seeking.
Inspiring Philosophy, where faith meets understanding. Should help if I add us to the stream. That would work. So
I was like, what's going on?
yeah, I'll get my life together. So everyone, I decided to give you a break from Dawa for a stream because it's a lot to handle. Tham was going to lose his mind. So we're doing something else. He requested we look at this video today.
Did I?
Yeah, this was your idea.
No, this was somebody else's idea that they brought to me.
No, this get your act together. I've already blamed you.
Do you think I'm going out of my way to watch Viced Rhino?
I don't know what you do in your spare time. I don't even want to know. Anyway,
I work and I go to the gym. That's about it.
Okay, well that's lame. Okay, so yeah, we'll be doing Dawa next week. That more of that nonsense because we're gonna get an Old Testament scholar to look at Muhammad in the Old Testament because that's always funny. It's always hilarious. So that'll be happening next week, and I want his brain to break watching the bad arguments. But for today, we are doing Atheist Dawa, so to speak. We are going to be looking at a video an atheist put out like a month or so ago, and he's debunking 10 arguments for God's existence. And I thought it'd be fun to go through and look at what they're putting out because we've not done that in a while. And some of you have requested we do arguments for God's existence or related content. So we'll do that today. So I hope that makes you happy. But yeah, we're going to be looking at this video that Viced Rhino put out where he debunks 10 arguments for God's existence, destroying theism. It's the end of the world. No one will ever come back from this. Or will they? What did you think of the video? I had so many problems with what he was doing.
I mean, yeah, there's obviously just a bunch of philosophical issues with the video. I wasn't really surprised by anything. It was really easy to kind of predict half of the stuff that's going to be said because it's just kind of the same thing over and over and over again. It was kind of disappointing, to be honest with you. I was hoping for some new philosophical challenges, but
yeah. Well, the problem with a lot of Viced Rhino's arguments is that he doesn't understand the arguments, at least a good portion of them. Like he rephrases the cosmological argument, the argument from consciousness, the argument from reason as ways he strawmans them so he can say they commit a fallacy of composition. It's like that's not how this works. He doesn't understand the modern forms of the ontological argument. There's just a lot of problems here.
I was really shocked by the argument from consciousness side of things because we'll get to it, but like I've never heard anybody in academic literature refer to the hard problem of consciousness or arguments for it be referred to as committing a composition division fallacy.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, that's the thing. But the argument doesn't commit a fallacy of composition, but Viced Rhino strawman it, rephrased it so that the argument was, like, oh, if all the parts of the brain, are not conscious, then the brain itself can't be conscious. Yeah. If that's the way we argued, sure. But no one makes the argument that way inside, scholarship philosophy. Like, for those interested, here are the arguments we're going to cover. Pascal's wager, the ontological argument from miracles, from beauty, from reason, consciousness, teleological, cosmological, moral, argument from personal experience. These are what he is phrasing as I guess these are the best ones. We're not going to defend all of these. I'm not a big fan of the argument from beauty. Pascal's wager isn't an argument, as he will even admit, so it's kind of weird he put it in there, but I digress. Are we ready to play some of this?
From beauty.
All right, well, we can dispute on that.
It depends how you formulate it, but yeah.
Yeah, all right. I personally just haven't really been impressed by it, I guess.
Fair enough.
So it's just been like, yeah, I guess, but yeah. All right, so let's play a little bit of this, and then we will pause. The first one he's going to do is Pascal's wager, which is, I think, his longest portion, at least one of the longest portions. So, okay. So let's get into his arguments for God's existence, and then we'll respond and show where he is going wrong.
Start with the weakest and work our way up to the better arguments. So coming in at number 10, we have Pascal's wager. Named for Blaise Pascal, he apparently didn't think it worth publication as it was first published in Pensée, a posthumous compilation of his unpublished notes. The basic idea is that either God exists or he does not exist. And this will lead you to one of four scenarios. If God exists and you believe he exists, then you stand to gain an immeasurable reward for your belief. But if he exists and you do not believe he exists, then you will be punished immeasurably for your disbelief. On the other hand, if God does not exist and you believe he exists, then you lose very little. And if he does not exist and you believe he does not exist, you gain very little. Given the immeasurably large gain if it turns out that God exists and you believe in him, it makes sense then that you should believe in him even if he does not exist, because the stakes are just too darn high to do otherwise. Notably, Pascal in the preamble to this argument states that reason cannot be used to come to a conclusion about the existence of God, stating God is or he is not. But to which side shall we incline? Reason can decide nothing here. According to reason, you can do neither the one thing nor the other. According to reason, you can defend neither of the propositions. So one of the starting assumptions of Pascal's wager is that there are no good arguments for or against God. So you may as well believe in God on the chance that he is real and will reward you for it. But I'm sure many of you have noticed a glaring problem here. It assumes that the Christian God is the only option. What if I believe in God, but I find deism to be easier to believe than Christianity, or Islam, or Hinduism, etc.? Well, then, if...
Real quick, if you think Islam is a good option, we've got so many issues right
I was
there.
waiting for it.
I mean, there's no evidence for Islam. Their argument from scientific miracles in the Quran debunked, perfect preservation of the Quran debunked. Now even their argument Muhammad's in the Bible, like Sajid Lippam is saying, yeah, that's not true. So Muhammad's not in our Bible. I'm like, okay, what is? Yeah,
and the miracles are getting debunked. Big John Steele put out a recent video. He went out and tested a bunch of Islamic miracles. Like, go check it out. Like, it's hilarious.
That's how bad it is. Like,
yeah,
there's literally nothing at this point. They're just on defense, trying to deal with the Islamic dilemmas we're throwing at them, and all the errors in the Quran. It's. You can check out. I was on History Valley. He's an atheist. He's got a channel. I was on his channel yesterday, just discussing the Islamic dilemmas. Yeah, I did it yesterday. And all the problems we have with Islam, like it's a minefield, let's just say the least. And yeah, there's something there, but yeah, I digress.
If Christianity ends up being true, I am just as fucked as I would have been if I didn't believe in God at all. But if reason is insufficient to arrive at a conclusion about the existence of a God, then how can it possibly differentiate between the different gods? Pascal even said as much, pointing out that we cannot possibly have any comprehension of the nature of God, pointing out that we know that an infinite exists. Numbers, for instance, are not finite. There's an infinity of numbers, but we do not know what it is. It is false that it is even. It is false that it is odd, for the addition of a unit can make no change to its nature. Yet it is a number, and every number is odd or even. This is certainly true of every finite number. So we may well know that there is a God without knowing what he is. So now we're left with a bit of a conundrum. If we believe that God exists, but the God we choose is the wrong God, then we still lose everything. That said, even at this point, it still makes sense to choose God and hope for the best. There's still a potentially infinite reward on the table, and while the odds of an infinite punishment have gone up, you're still guaranteed to lose out if you don't pick a God. Right? Wrong. Inherent to your choice of which God to believe in is also a choice to live your life in accordance with the claimed desires of that God. Pascal was explicit that this entails a sacrifice of pleasures. Quote, I would soon have renounced pleasure, they say, had I faith. For my part, I tell you, you would soon have faith if you renounce pleasure. His solution to the problem of not being able to make a conscious choice to believe in God was to renounce pleasure in order to gain faith, which almost makes faith seem like a coping mechanism. Can't feel good, may as well believe that I'll feel good later to compensate. And that is the problem. If you follow his advice and renounce worldly pleasures, but it turns out that God did not exist, then then you literally turned the only life you will ever get into misery for no reason. You threw away literally everything for the hope of gaining something after death, but gained nothing. That is such a large downside. And even if God is real, if you give up all your worldly pleasures but still can't make yourself actually believe in him, the Bible says you still go to hell. So you missed out on the pleasures of life for the sake of an eternal reward and still wound up with eternal damnation. If that's how it's going to go anyway, I'd rather at least enjoy my century or so of life while I have it. But really, this argument gets the bottom rung due to a technicality more than anything. You see, it's not actually an argument for the existence of God. It's an argument for belief in God, whether or not God is real. It doesn't even pretend to offer proof of God in any way whatsoever. I point that out because number 9 is, in my opinion...
All right, before we get to number 9, let's talk about Pascal's wager here. For one thing, before we even get to that, he's sort of assuming that Pascal, or his interpretation of Pascal, is like, if you choose theism, you're not going to have a life of pleasure. And I would push back. I would say, arguing from Aquinas, natural law, that choosing Christian theism is the most fulfilling, flourishing, pleasurable life out there. Like as Peter Kraft said, the damned will say they've always been in hell, and the saints will say they've always been in heaven. This is something I've pushed. Like, one of the reasons to become a Christian is because your life gets more fulfilling. You have a peace that passes understanding. Jesus said, I have come so that you will have life and have it abundantly. Does that mean we're always happy? No. Does it mean we don't have struggles? We don't have to carry our cross? No, but there's a more fulfilling life involved. And of course, sociological research shows this, that Christians report high levels of happiness, well-being. They have more coping mechanisms going through things like cancer. They have lower rates of depression, lower rates of suicide, better family structures, lower levels of aggression, more self-control. I mean, check out my video, Is Christianity Harmful?, where I go through a ton of that data. So I would just push back and go, sociological speaking, Christians actually do live very happy, fulfilling lives and lower rates of depression. I mean, I'd much rather be a Christian than a secularist, even in just the pragmatic sense.
That's the thing that really stood out. Like, putting aside the fact that he's focusing on Pascal himself here rather than like some of the updated literature on this, the fact that the thing that stood out to me the most was exactly what you're pointing to, because the way he phrases it was, well, you're just basically giving up everything, and if you're wrong, you lose everything. And it's like, what am I actually giving up?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just giving up some hedonistic tendencies at the end of the day. Bro, is that like all you're focused on? like, is your life seriously just like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that's it? Like, no, I don't think that's what you're gonna say. So why are you phrasing it in such a way? Like, I don't know, man. That was the part to me that stood out, just like insane to me. I don't know what else to say to that.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think, again, if you want to have a debate on the sociological research, we're not going to get into much of it here because I have beat that horse into the ground. Christians are just simply have a lot more. They have a lot better virtues, a lot better lives. See my debate with Lawrence Krauss. See my debate with Phil Zuckerman. I mean, it's just over and over again. Christians tend to live far more fulfilling lives. And we can make that inference from a lot of the sociological research. But on to Pascal's wager. If you have any slides you want to put them up, sure. I just feel like, I agree.
Show people.
I forgot to do it. There you go.
There you go. Just for anybody, right? Like, what he's presenting is such a simplistic way of looking at it, and it gets really complicated really fast. This book right here is something that I would recommend to anybody that wants to actually get into it. I'm not going to defend Pascal's wager here. I am just for sake of time, but it's a lot more complicated than people think, and the many gods objection and many of these standard objections that people think is just a kill shot to this argument doesn't really hold up, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with Viced Rhino here that it's not really an argument for God's existence. I wouldn't use that. The way you use Pascal's wager is if you've presented arguments for God's existence, arguments for Christianity, and you got them close to the line, but they just don't have enough to cross. That's where Pascal's wager comes in. You go, okay, you've clearly studied the data. You're on the fence. Here's Pascal's wager. This should just get you into theism. It's an argument. It's a pragmatic argument on top of actual arguments you've used to get them most of the way there, and then Pascal wager.
Hold on, people in the chat are saying they didn't see the book. Can they see?
Well, look with your eyes.
Well, it was.
talking about?
Oh, I looked at the stream and it's not showing for some reason.
It's showing. I see it
Oh,
there.
there. Well, it's showing this time. It looks like.
All right. Pascal's Wager
So
by
there you go,
Jeff
chat.
Jordan. Pragmatic Arguments for Belief in God. Okay.
Yes.
So now you've seen it.
Stop complaining.
Stop complaining. We have welcomed you here. Be courteous. Anyway.
Coming to my house.
No, we appreciate everyone here. Shut up.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll get to some super chats before we go on. Please try to do Daniel 2 and 7 when you get him on. This is referring to the Old Testament scholar we're going to have on. We're going to look at the Torah for that stream, but yeah, we will do in a future one. We will do Daniel because that's that's hilarious,
Oh, man, dude. I have
And
so
trying
much
to-
fun stuff on Daniel too when it comes to the two power stuff.
trying to find Islam or Muhammad and Daniel
Oh, for
is
that.
like, oh my! I've seen Muslims try to say the Son of Man is Muhammad.
Stop.
Yes, I have, Than.
Is Muhammad the Cloud Rider?
Yes. Listen, Dawa doesn't think; it just does. It's the way Dawa do. Dawa don't think; Dawa do. That's the yabba dabba do.
I'm doing the thing where I'm trying to steel man it again, and it's not working.
Listen, your brain's gonna stop working. Let's move on. Less Dawa, more atheism, please. Love you guys. Well, it will depend on how many people watch the stream today, Maurice. We get more views when we do Islam. I'm just gonna be honest. I mean, What?
Mike, you've built a monster.
Mhm.
I was telling Matt and some other people like this fall I'm probably gonna do a deep dive into Islam, and I don't know. Well, you've awakened something in me, Mike.
I know, happened to me too. Welcome to the party. But listen, I am on a Dawa kick right now doing Islam because I consider this a serious threat to human civilization and truth. For sure. I mean, we're gonna do other topics. Don't worry. We're not gonna forget the atheists. I just also feel like this is an important religion that needs to be completely debunked,
Yep.
and so we'll do that for sure. Thank you, Cole, for becoming a channel member. Have you guys read any of Matthew Bates' stuff?
My my upcoming video on adoptionist Christology incorporates some of the Bates stuff.
Yeah.
And so will some of my stuff on the two powers in heaven when those
That'll
videos
adoptionist video will be out in the middle of August, just so you guys know. The next video we have coming out is how Christianity created human rights. That video will be live for donors this Sunday. You guys want to see that video this Sunday? Sign up to be a donor down below, inspiringphilosophy.com/give. You'll get a link to that this Sunday. So if you sign up to donate now, just give $5 or $10, you'll get a link to that video. So please sign up to donate because we still need more donors to be fully funded. Than needs to get off ramen noodles. And I'm not giving up steak. So sorry, Than.
It's okay. I get my protein in through squirrel meat.
I'm joking. I haven't had steak in weeks. It's been a
Really?
hard life. Yeah. I think Pascal's Wager works if you pair it with the evidence for Christianity, e.g., the evidence for Jesus' death, life, resurrection. Yeah, that's the point we were making.
This is one of the modern ways of actually engaging in a Pascal's Wager. People will put together like a positive case for Christianity and then say, hey, with the prior probability of Christianity being true and our background knowledge being X a percentage, now here's where you can make like a really strong Pascal's Wager for pragmatic belief.
Yeah. Sygart's new book is coming out in less than a month. Are you guys going to have him on to discuss it? Yes. I'll have him on. I'm going to try to find a video for him to review with me, and then we'll do that because that's always fun to do. Joining for Pascal's Wager, Prob doesn't have the benefits of intrinsic religiosity, though, right? What?
Why wouldn't it?
Comment. I mean, yeah, now I see what he means. Yeah, it would. I don't see why it wouldn't. Yeah. Because you're not believing for cultural reasons. You're actually diving in and believing in God's existence. I think that comes with it. I guess it would depend on the individual. Let's just say it probably would depend on the individual.
It doesn't necessitate that it wouldn't, but it depends. Like you said, it depends on the individual because again, belief formation isn't just going to be like this intellectual thing where it's like completely data driven. As soon as you actually immerse yourself and start participating in the church, participating in worship, and being part of that group identity, those beliefs are going to start forming stronger and stronger in your psyche.
Yeah. We'll get to some more super chats in a bit. We are going to start prioritizing the ones that donate more. So if you give like 20, 50, or 100 even, we will prioritize those. So just so you guys know, help support the channel. give more, and we will prioritize those. So anyway, let's get back to the video to hear the next one. And this is the one where I was like, you got to be kidding me.
This is really bad.
This was a ball drop here. So let's get into this one.
The most inane, ridiculous, and downright silly of all of the arguments for God. And that is, of course, the ontological argument. When I make videos like this, I endeavor to provide you with the best versions of the argument that I can, given my understanding. And I have already done a standalone video on just this one argument where I explain several different iterations of it as found in different philosophical texts. And as far as I can tell, what it boils down to is God is defined as existing, therefore God exists. It gets hidden in a lot of philosophical jargon, talking about possible worlds, maximal greatness, the property of necessity, but all of them wind up coming back to one thing, the definition of God. God is a maximally great being. A maximally great being is defined as having all the properties that is better to have than not to have, and existence is a property that is better to have than not to have. Therefore, since God is defined as a maximally great being, and that's how we're defining maximal greatness, God exists. I'm not going to get into the weeds here regarding the 7 or 8 different versions of this argument, depending on how you count them, but suffice it to say for now that I usually focus on Christian apologetics on this channel, and so there is a response to this from a Christian perspective. The Bible explicitly states in Ecclesiastes 4:3 that non-existence is better than existence. So according to the Bible, a maximally great being would have the property of non-existence rather than existence. If you do want to actually see me break down all of the various forms of this argument, I'll leave a link to a video where I did exactly that, but it does get a little bit tedious. So I don't necessarily recommend it, but the link's there if you're a masochist, I guess. I'm so good at self-promotion. Like and subscribe. Number 8 is the argument from miracles.
All right. Before we get to the argument for miracles, let's just remember this was not a good philosophical case, but luckily we have one right here.
Twinning.
Listen, if you don't understand the ontological argument,
Don't read this if you don't understand the ontological argument. This will go way over your head.
It seems that the most people who think it's dumb or a bad argument clearly always demonstrate they don't understand the argument. If you talk to a very intellectual atheist, they do take it seriously. This is why there are entire books written on it, there are entire responses written on it. It's not like scientific miracles in the Quran that no academic takes seriously. It's like this is a legit argument that skeptics do have to deal with, and a lot of online skeptics don't realize that. So
yeah, but Mike, it uses philosophical jargon like possible world semantics.
Okay, so basically it seemed that the Viced Rhino only presented the original version from St. Anselm, as far as I can tell, that assumes existence as a property. This has been dealt with time and time again. We've moved on past that. Look at versions from like Alvin Plantinga, for example.
Yeah.
It's not that existence is a property. It's that necessity is a property. Contingency and necessity are properties. We are contingent beings. Okay. We have the property of contingency. We can fail to exist. God is a necessary being. So if you follow the logic there, so if God exists in some possible worlds, then he exists in all possible worlds because he has the property of necessity. It just logically follows that would include the actual world as well. So I think Peter S. Williams once sort of phrased it like this: if it's possible God exists, then God exists. Because if God is possible and necessary, because he has that property.
Version up for you.
Great. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So if God is necessary and he's possible, so he contains no logical contradictions. He's not an impossible entity. He is possible. Okay. And he includes in that possible definition the property of necessity. Then it just logically follows. And the reason why I don't think people like this argument is because they feel like they're being tricked. It can't be that simple. But I think if you actually follow the logic, at the end of the day, your emotions don't matter. Logic is. Like just follow the logic at the end of the day. And that's the argument we make. Like, you may not like the conclusion, but it's not that easily debunked. And there's a lot of problems with trying to debunk it. So yeah, I don't think it's you could just dismiss it as a trick. There is something to it. And maybe it's actually the case that God's existence does flow out of logic because, of course, he's the foundation of reality. And this is just one of the ways that shows that. At the end of the day, if you just think you don't understand it or you think it's a trick, I don't have to tell you. The logic is just simply there. But I mean, I just don't think Viced Rhino really understands the argument.
No, I don't think he does. Or if he does, he's just not broadcasting that he does when he hand waves possible world semantics as jargon that has nothing to do with the argument.
Yeah. Did you have any more slides you want to put up?
I mean, we can, if you want to talk about the whole Ecclesiastes thing.
Yeah, this was another weird argument. This is not
it was really
the ontological argument. Yeah.
Because Ecclesiastes isn't making like a normative claim about metaphysics. It's a lament about evil and suffering in the world. But like, I don't know how you can. I don't even know. This just seems like this was bad faith cherry picking. I think anybody with a brain could read Ecclesiastes and be like, yeah, this has nothing to do with the philosophy involved in the ontological argument.
All right, let's get on to the argument for miracles. I think this is another longer section, but yeah, we'll just play this through.
I got quite a few slides for this.
Okay, yeah, we'll go through your slides after this one.
Was actually a bit hard to pin down in the lineup because on the one hand, there's really no good evidence for any particular miracle. So to use miracles as evidence for God just kind of fails right out of the gate. But on the other hand, in a hypothetical world where miracles do happen, this is actually the only argument on this list that has even the potential to not just get you to the conclusion that a God exists, but get you all the way to a specific God. If Christians had the healing powers that the Bible says that they should have, that would be pretty compelling evidence for the truth of Christianity specifically, rather than just a generic God idea. But unfortunately,
we don't have healing powers. We're not Jedi. It's the Holy Spirit working through people. And that's his power. He doesn't just say, yes, anyone can do miracles. Like, that would be very irresponsible. It's just wanted to clarify.
Fortunately, there is no good evidence for miracles. The most impressive miracles are only ever found as stories in ancient documents. And even if the people writing these documents sincerely believed in the truth of the miracles, as people reading these accounts centuries to millennia later, the most plausible explanation for the miracle claim will always be that the person recording it was mistaken in one way or another. But assuming that the authors were sincere believers, it is also possible that they were just lying, as many Christians would agree was the case for Joseph Smith, despite the Mormons still considering themselves to be Christian. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention my absolute favorite instance of the supposed documentation of a healing miracle. In the 60s, a woman was living with a reported visual acuity of 2400, which is effectively blind. In 1972, her husband prayed for her with the laying on of hands, and miraculously, Jesus healed her vision, such that in 1974, her visual acuity was measured to be 2100, which is still dog shit, but now it's dog shit that doesn't qualify for any sort of government assistance or accommodation, so yay, Jesus! But the miracle isn't over. In 2001, she went for another eye exam, and her eyesight was found to be 20/40, which is only a little bit bad. But there's a few things here. Firstly, I find it amusing that God would miraculously heal her eyesight, but not all the way. Then there's the fact that the case report title says that this healing, which took 2 years to go from horrible to bad, and then nearly another 3 decades to go from bad to only a little bad, was instantaneous. But also I've left out a rather key detail here. Her 1974 examination found her vision to be 2100 when it was uncorrected, that is, without glasses. They did not report her corrected visual acuity at that time. But the 2001 examination, and all subsequent examinations, only reported her corrected visual acuity, that is, with glasses. So it is entirely within the realm of plausibility that her uncorrected eyesight was still 2100 in 2001. If I were to take everything in this case study at face value, then I can hope that one day if I lose my eyesight, faith in Jesus will restore it just enough that I can have kind of crappy vision with glasses. And let's address the elephant in the room. I am currently wearing glasses, so just to satisfy some of your curiosity, my visual acuity last time it was measured was only slightly worse than 20/20 in my right eye and about 20/30 in my left eye. So my glasses basically have a dummy lens on the right and a very slight lens on the left. So it seems like Jesus wouldn't really do much for me at the moment. Number 7.
Talk about going to one of the just cherry picking one case to sort of make the point and then ignoring a plethora of so many other cases. I mean, we did a stream, what was it, January or February, with a friend who went through a bunch of actual pretty legit evidence for miracles. Yeah. Some even documented by the Catholic Church, was all sorts of medical examinations and the like. I mean, just finding one case and saying, well, I have problems with this doesn't mean we cannot draw from so many more.
Well, so here's the thing. The slides that I have, Mike, are actually focusing on this case.
Okay.
Because the problems he has with this case are not problems that should make you think, well, that something else happened other than God intervened here. Just really quickly, he says, no good evidence, but besides the fact that we have medically documented healings, besides the fact that Craig Keener has a book outlining thousands and thousands and thousands of testimony when it comes to miracle cases.
Yeah, I got it right there. Yeah.
One of my good friends, Caleb Jackson, has an upcoming book on this where he's been working on this topic for a long time. I mean, if you think the argument for miracles is really bad, I'm really skeptical about how much work you've actually put into miracles and just thought your incredulity is enough to hand wave the whole entire concept away. So with this particular case that he brings up, this is the case report. And I just have some of the quotes and timestamps and stuff like that for what he says. So, first of all, he's wrong. Her eyesight was actually worse than 20/400. These are all going to be quotes from the case as well. This is the medical documentation that is supplied as well. And if anybody's curious, like, you can go to the paper and scroll down to the supplementary materials, and you have access to any of that. So this case predates the availability of much of the ophthalmic testing now used for diagnoses. In the 1960s, an ophthalmoscope and or slit lamp were available to examine the retina. Medical records from ophthalmic examination in 1960 indicate uncorrected vision was 7/200 in each eye, roughly corresponding to finger counting vision only, and thus legal blindness. In January 29, 1971, a school for blind people recorded her uncorrected vision as finger counting on the right and hand motion on the left. The right could be slightly improved with correction to 20/400. She had extropia, so on and so forth. You keep going. And then she had to get a cane to move. She had to read Braille. Like, she was legally blind, you guys. Okay, that's the point. I'm just going to read this. This is again from the paper. But after completing a mobility training in 1972, one evening prior to going to bed, she regained her vision instantaneously after receiving, PIP stands for proximal intercessory prayer, from her husband. This experience occurred after approximately 13 years of blindness. The proximal intercessory prayer was presented in a Christian tradition extended to God as both asked for her eyesight to be restored that night. Now, to be clear, some background information that's really important here is that these were not charismatics. This was not at a faith healing conference. This was in their home out of desperation to God to heal her eyesight. They were not cessationists, but they were of a Baptist tradition that typically is cessationist. And so there was no like predisposition for belief in miracles or anything like that. They're actually on the record saying like the only types of miracles that they believed in or thought were really real were the ones in the Bible. From there, the first written documentation of her visual acuity after this incident was on a prescription pad note showing an improvement in visual acuity. In 1974, her visual acuity was 20/100 in each eye without correction, like Viced Rhino states. Here's what he kind of ignores. This is a more than 400% increase in visual acuity. We do not have a parallel to this anywhere.
So this is not like some sort of like natural thing that's been documented.
Yeah. I mean, like, is it logically possible that there's some sort of unknown natural cause or law? Sure. But that would go against everything we know currently about eye medicine. We'll just briefly call it that, right? Were they lying? Were they mistaken? I don't think so. How can you lie or be mistaken about this for over this long?
Right. That's a pretty good documentation there. Yeah.
She has to get glasses. Her eyesight was found to be corrected to 20/40 with correction, all this other stuff. So Viced Rhino is going to object and go, okay, well, God didn't restore her eyesight all the way, blah, blah, blah. Typically, what you actually end up finding in miracle cases is that God, when he heals somebody, he restores them back to what they originally were like, not like to some sort of Edenic perfection state or something like that. If that was the case, then, I mean, like, Jesus had holes in his hands. That seems like a clear counterexample to the miracle of the resurrection.
Well, I mean, it's this idea that like God has to turn us into superhumans. I mean, God is
exactly.
That's never been the goal of God. I mean,
and so the other thing to keep in mind. Sorry, go ahead.
I would say these miracles work also with God's sanctification processes going on here. Like these need to be taken into account, our own nature, what God is doing in each individual. Some people, you know, God does heal, some he doesn't for his own reasons. If he's omniscient, knows the path of every human, the timeline of every human, he knows when healings, how much in each one to give based on who that person is and what path they're going through in terms of their sanctification.
Right. And she was 60, but at this point, she's 60 years old. How many 60-year-olds do you know that have 20/40 corrected vision? And it stays there to the day they die.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So why didn't Jesus heal her all the way? I just think that's a rhetorical trick at the end of the day. It's going to be a constant moving of the goalposts no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, here's what you're going to have to do. We have an observation. The Christian response is Jesus healed her, is the hypothesis. If you want to just say, well, why didn't Jesus heal her all the way? You're not putting up a new theory. So if you can imagine like the white box being 100% of the probability space, Jesus healed her being the hypothesis, it occupies, let's just say 33% of the probability space, right? You're going to have to come up with other hypotheses to fulfill the probability space, and just pointing to issues that you have with this because it doesn't prove that it was a miracle. It doesn't do anything. You have to argue that some theory is going to be better than the hypothesis that Jesus healed her. So,
Well, this is a point I've made in the past when we debate atheists all the time. Hey, we've all this evidence for God's existence, and then we get Matt Dillahunty going, "Well, I'm not convinced." And my response is, I don't care.
right.
I have given data and I've given an argument and I've said theism is the best explanation. If you don't agree, fine. You don't have to agree, but don't say my explanation is not the best explanation if you're not offering an alternative. And this is what we're getting from Viced Rhino. These arguments don't work. Okay, but there is still data here that needs to be explained. Do you have a better explanation? No, then theists are justified in saying that
Right.
theism is the best explanation until you offer an alternative, which you have not done. This is a problem when he goes through a lot of these arguments, for sure.
Right. As it stands, the most probable theory is that this is a miracle because he didn't present any alternative hypotheses to explain what happened.
And it seems as though some data was left out, which is important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. I didn't know that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. All right, let's play one more argument he's going to present, and then we will get to super chats. This is the last argument that I'm just sort of like meh about. And then we'll get to some more of the more serious arguments.
7 is the argument from beauty. Basically, the argument is that appreciation of beauty is fairly universal. And while there are cultural differences, there are also things that seem to transcend culture, like the beauty of a sunset. This transcendent nature of beauty points to a transcendent being who designed things to be beautiful and designed us to appreciate beauty. Of course, the problem with this argument primarily lies in the fact that there are indeed cultural differences, and these differences can be quite significant. To my Western ear, the microtonal music coming out of places like India and the Middle East sounds out of tune, but clearly there are plenty of people who find those styles of music pleasing to the ear, otherwise those styles wouldn't exist. The ultimate origin of our sense of beauty is a matter of some debate. Well, I mean, aside from the obvious, she's hot, I want to stick my dick in her type of beauty, that one's kind
Sorry, I forgot that he said that in the stream. Gross.
of self-explanatory from an evolutionary perspective. But for the other types of beauty, there are a few hypotheses. One is that it's a neurological shortcut for the detection of abnormalities, with the detection of abnormalities being an important survival trait, thus being favored by evolution. Another is also related to attracting attention. All throughout the animal kingdom, we see mating displays where potential mates try to draw attention to themselves with over-the-top displays of one kind or another. Humans don't do this in the same way as, say, peacocks do, but the idea is that mating displays are such a basal trait that our brains are still wired to appreciate attention-grabbing displays. So we find peacocks to be beautiful despite not wanting to mate with them. This can be translated to other things like sunsets. The bright, vivid colors are reminiscent of mating displays, and so we appreciate them. Through the process of evolutionary exaptation, which is when evolution repurposes an existing structure or function for something other than what it was originally evolved for, we find beauty in places where it isn't even remotely linked to mating displays. There's also the idea that familiarity plays an important role, with us being more likely to find something aesthetically pleasing if we are familiar with it, which from an evolutionary perspective would aid with things like finding your way home. But conversely, there's also a mechanism by which we find beauty in the unfamiliar, relating to knowledge acquisition and exploration. Taken together, there seems to be a sort of balance between appreciation for the safe familiarity of home and the appreciation for discovering new things and places. Add in natural variation among individuals, and this seems like a decent evolutionary mechanism that drives exploration and expansion while maintaining a safe place from which to launch exploration. The truth of the matter is that the development of our appreciation for aesthetics probably evolved due to a complex interplay between all of these mechanisms, and probably even some that we haven't even considered yet. The fact that an appreciation for beauty has several naturalistic explanations does not mean that God is not responsible for giving us an appreciation for aesthetics, but it does mean that God is not necessary to explain our ability to appreciate aesthetics, which then renders this argument rather moot. At number 6...
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll admit I've never been too big on the argument from beauty. I've just been like, meh.
I
don't
like
know
it.
if I. Well, you defend it. I'll be here.
Well, okay, fine. Okay, so first of all, the first point I want to make is if you think the argument from beauty is bad, look at Mike. He's clearly beautiful.
Okay, we're gonna get back to the normal stream, guys. This is ridiculous.
Okay,
I'm not
okay, I'll
gonna
be
have these-
serious. I'll be serious. Okay. The first thing I just really want to point out is at the end of that clip, right? well, it doesn't make God's existence necessary, and so it's a moot point. What? Like, no, there are probabilistic forms of different
Right.
arguments. Like, it's not like every formulation of every argument is saying, hey, if you have this, God is necessary, therefore God exists. You can have probabilistic formulations. Okay. Second of all, while I would argue that aesthetic values are real, the argument from beauty doesn't have to run on a realist account of aesthetic value. So you can phrase it this way, for instance. On the condition that God exists, it seems like God is going to be motivated to create, for instance, creatures that can have aesthetic experiences. Whether or not those experiences are truth tracking, the actual experience that comes from aesthetics, as first of all, as Viced Rhino points out, helps with evolutionary fitness and all this other stuff. And on top of that, it aids in creating art, it aids in creating architecture, all sorts of stuff. It is a means by which people can actually connect with God, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so it's like all of these things are actually like goods that can come about because of aesthetic experiences. So even if they're not truth tracking, the fact that we have those experiences in the first place, despite the fact that we might not agree with what's beautiful, still seems to be much more expected on a condition God exists than the hypothesis that atheism is true. Just pointing to evolution is not helping, because now you just have to ask the question, well, why do we live in a reality such that the evolutionary process brought about aesthetic preferences? You might make these, you might point to some of the stuff that Viced Rhino points out, but all this bottoms out to then it's going to be some sort of fine-tuning argument, and you're not going to win that battle. So
Yeah.
that's the long story short.
Well, I've argued, like we evolved to be able to do science. That doesn't mean science is a subjective process.
Right.
We evolved to discover things in the natural world. We could evolve also to discover moral values and duties. That doesn't mean moral values and duties are subjective. Same you could apply here. So, but again, I've never been.
I'm not saying it's a kill shot argument, but I think depending on, I think whether it's a realist version or an anti-realist version, I think you can still point to these things as being evidence.
All right, I'm gonna get to some super chats. I'm prioritizing more donation power behind the super chat, so we will do those first. Is there a way to justify God's attributes being great beyond just using intuition, subjective preferences, and scripture? Well, we use logic.
Yeah.
Like this is one of Richard Swinburne's points. Is so like think about like what's a simpler explanation, a maximally great being or a quasi-maximally great being? A simpler explanation in definition is a maximally great being, because it would include things like all powerful, omniscience. If it's like partially powerful, you have to include additional explanations as to why it's only partially powerful or partially omnipotent. So it's much easier to posit a maximally great being. And then, of course, that comes in bring in things like cosmological arguments, ontological arguments, these kinds of things. So, yes, we use logical principles. We're not just using intuition. I don't think anyone has argued that we just use intuition. You can use that to help. Intuition is a starting point, not your conclusion necessarily. But we'll get to that later when we get to the moral argument. But yeah, I think we use logical principles for sure. Let's see here. Apostolic Zoomer. I think I follow him on X. Is there any strategy you're aware of that atheists use to contest premises 2 to 5 of the ontological argument? God bless you both. Your videos have helped me a lot. That's great to hear. No, because it's all the objections to the ontological argument, as far as I've seen. And again, it's been a while since I've studied it, to be fair, but it's been more like, well, we need to argue God is not in a logical concept, that this doesn't get you to possibility and necessity in the actual world. Arguments around the nature of necessity, quoting a book title there, but those are going to be different issues. And again, depends on which ontological argument you're presenting, because there's different formulations of it. I think you're thinking of Craig's version.
Yeah, the modern most contemporary debates are on the modal ontological argument, and it's on the possibility premise at the end of the day, because the atheist retort is it's possible God does not exist, and the debate kind of just right now is on those two premises and what the symmetry breakers are going to be.
Mhm.
That's where that debate kind of lies in.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm fine if you want to answer in a different video. It is a sin to euthanize at old age, and as you're losing the ability to care for yourself if you don't have money or family to take care of you. That is an interesting argument. I totally see the logic in it, to die peacefully in old age. I think there needs to be moral justifications for it, though. Like, so you're like, like you're on your last leg kind of thing, possibly. But I also do have some objections to it, because I worry about the ramifications of that and how far that
Yeah.
would go, how that's going to pragmatically play out in society. Like, we don't want to end up like what's kind of going on with Canada right now, where people are euthanizing because they're depressed, and there are companies forming to help you do it. That's a dystopian nightmare.
This sounds like a
Canada.
utilitarian kind of view, which I would kind of outright reject.
Yeah, and I think on virtue ethics, I would say there's still no reason you're not going to increase in virtue in those last few moments. Why deny that? But I mean, that's a whole nother debate topic for sure. What do you say to the file drawer objection on N with billions of miracle believing Christians? Of course, there'll be crazy fluke things we don't know, like natural explanations. Okay, but like
this objection. So this is a really bad objection in my opinion, because first of all, if you're just going to say, of course, there's crazy flukes, well, we still have to explain why those crazy flukes are there. And two, just think about like the structure of the argument here in general, right? It's just saying, like, given enough instances of people getting sick, well, of course, we're going to expect at least one of them to have some sort of miraculous healing. Like, if you're the skeptic, I'm just going to push back and go, like, fine, just for sake of example, I'll grant that. Is that really what you want to say when it comes to something like the resurrection of Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad, and I would just argue that that's not a good justification for belief in Jesus either, by the way. I just don't think it's good on probabilistic grounds.
How would you explain Jeremiah 33, 17, 18, which is, for thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel, and the Levitical priest shall never lack a man in the presence of burnt offerings, to burn grain offerings and make sacrifices. The prior verse, behold, the days are coming. It's like 2 or 3 verses earlier, verse 14. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will fulfill the promise I made to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. So that's fulfilled in Jesus, what we would say, because he's our priest and our king. So that's what we would say for something like that. Cerebral Faith recently wrote an article explaining why he no longer buys Walton's view of Genesis 1. Have you read it? No, I've not. So I can't comment on it. Would you save your pet from a murderer? Yeah.
Or a murderer? No, it says or a murderer.
Oh, I misread that. I was like, depends on the situation and the context.
Yeah.
You cannot just ask those.
I'm going to say both.
Yeah. Fam deep dive in Islam, but no deep dive into One Piece. Humiliated, you see?
If you guys have the power to like put an extra 10 hours into my days somehow, I'll watch One Piece. Yeah.
I watched the live action version on Netflix, if that counts. By that logic, couldn't you say God doesn't exist? After all, isn't it possible that a maximally great being doesn't exist?
Yeah, that's a big debate right now amongst philosophers, is that possibility premise.
Yeah, and I don't think that one works, because you can't say logically why it's necessary God doesn't exist. Like, why? Like, because it's about the properties God entails. Why would God entail non-existence? It just seems like a weird argument, if that's where you're going. Because I know some people try to say, if it's possible God doesn't exist, then he doesn't exist in some possible worlds. And then he doesn't exist in some possible worlds. He doesn't exist in all possible worlds. And that doesn't logically follow.
Yeah, it gets really messy.
Yeah, that's the reverse ontological argument doesn't work, because it's not God. It's because the reason why God is in all possible worlds is because he entails the property of necessity. If you're saying God entails non-existence, you're assuming the conclusion. That's begging the question. He dressed like a caricature of an atheist. See? Great to see powerful Christian minds. You know what, Tim? If you keep sending these in for only $2, I'm going to stop reading them. These need to be at least $10 for me to read at this point. Just so you're aware.
I want to see a Tim and Mike fight.
I'll grapple.
There you go.
Could you say that Christ is ontologically the door-bred way, or is this stretching the meaning of ontology? Yes.
I would say yes, stretching the meaning of ontology.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Arguments from beauty from a lack of scientific evidence or sound theories of our appreciation of beauty points to God. God wants us to enjoy beauty, or beauty is like God, hence points to him. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, again, I think what Than was saying is kind of what you're tracking with. So,
Yeah.
all right. Again, I'll get to some more super chats in a bit. We'll prioritize the higher donations, but let's get back to the video and do the argument from reason. And yeah.
Number 6, we have the argument from reason. This is basically the idea that if our thoughts and reasoning abilities arise purely naturalistically, there's no reason to trust them. Their origin is non-rational, so why would they be rational? Stated formally, 1. No belief is rationally inferred if it can be fully explained in terms of non-rational causes. 2. If naturalism is true, then all beliefs can be fully explained in terms of non-rational causes. 3. Therefore, if naturalism is true, then no belief is rationally inferred. 4. We have good reason to accept naturalism only if it can be rationally inferred from good evidence. 5. Therefore, there is not and cannot be good reason to accept naturalism.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is C.S. Lewis's argument. I think he was making it against materialism.
I haven't dug into this too much, to be honest with you. When I watched this, I was like, is this tangentially related to the evolutionary argument from naturalism against naturalism, though?
It is, yeah. He does make the case. So I read Victor Reppert's chapter in Blackwell's Companion. I also read his book, C.S. Lewis, A Dangerous Idea. I think the way Reppert has it in here is it's materialism, but I think that's just a minor point.
There are numerous problems here. First and foremost is the fact that our reasoning abilities are indeed quite flawed. We invented the scientific method as a way of compensating for this fact. There is a certain basic level where having beliefs that materiality is an evolutionary survival advantage, but we also evolved a bunch of cognitive shortcuts for reaching conclusions which worked well enough from a natural selection perspective, but which can also lead to incorrect beliefs. Confirmation bias, for instance, takes our ability to connect effects to their causes and puts it on steroids. Two things are temporally linked, so they must also be causally linked. The moon is full, and people are acting a bit weird. Guess the full moon makes people act weird. Once that link is made, we have a tendency to minimize examples that would contradict that link, if we even notice them to begin with. People are acting crazy today. Must be a full moon. Oh, it's not? Okay, well, I'll just forget this observation by the end of the night. It's fairly easy to picture an evolutionary situation where such a bias would actually be helpful. I saw Steve eat this berry, then he got sick. Later, I saw Greg eat that berry, but he was fine. Forget about Greg. I don't want to get sick, and Steve got sick, so I ain't eating them berries. It's pattern recognition combined with a generous dose of better safe than sorry, and this is but one example of many cognitive biases that we are all prone to. If our ability to reason came from an omnipotent God who cared about us, you'd think he could have made it more reliable than it is. But the argument—
That's not the argument, though. The argument isn't that, oh, we have perfect reason. Notice the straw man. No one has said our reasoning is perfect. The question is what makes more sense? Reasoning on a theistic worldview or reasoning in a natural or materialist worldview?
Yeah.
This is just saying, yeah, our reasoning isn't perfect doesn't actually deal with the argument. You're missing the whole point. The question is why? How would you expect if everything is material causation? Where would intentionality come from? Where would this stuff come from? So again, Victor Reppert's chapter opened up here in this that covers this. I'm going to read a quote he uses from Daniel Dennett on this, which I think is interesting. So he cites Daniel Dennett, and he says, okay, so he's talking about this. He says, so I think we find as powerful and direct an expression as could be of the intuition that lies behind the belief in original intentionality. Okay. He cites a book, then he goes on to say, something has to give. Either you must abandon meaning rationalism, the idea that you are unlike the fledgling cuckoo, not yeah, that's what he says. The idea that you are unlike the fledgling cuckoo, not only having access, but in having privileged access to your meanings. Or you must abandon that naturalism that insists that you are, after all, just a product of natural selection, whose intentionality is thus derivative and hence potentially indeterminate. In other words, there's no reason to think you would have meaning, intentionality, reasoning on this non-theistic worldview. If everything comes from material causes, where is rationality going to come out of that? And Victor Reppert's point in arguing the argument from reason is that reasoning makes more sense, and it's a simpler, more parsimonious explanation on theism. He's not saying it proves. He's just saying it makes more sense. Whereas on naturalism or materialism, you need an extra jump to explain why we have intentionality, why we're able to reason. Pointing out we have flawed reasoning does not mean we don't have reasoning in general. And the way this is explained in Christian history is that is through the fall. Our reasoning capabilities have been marred from the fall. So this doesn't even address the argument.
Yeah, the argument doesn't presume by my lights that we have perfect reasoning capacities. And the justification, by the way, of like, oh, well, we don't have perfect reasoning, but we invented the scientific method to bypass that. Well, how did we invent the scientific method? We used our reasoning capacities. Like,
good point. Here's another quote from Ed Pfizer that Victor Upper cites. Brain processes composed as they are meaningless chemical components, seemed as inherently devoid of intentionality as sound waves or ink marks. Any intentionality, they would also have to be derived from something else. But if anything physical would be devoid of intrinsic intentionality, whatever does have intrinsic intentionality would thereby have to be non-physical. So this is his point here, is that in the material, in the natural, there is no such thing as intentionality, reasoning, these kinds of things. They seem to be derived from non-physical aspects. That's a better explanation. But let's continue going to hear his other argument.
Argument also makes use of the fallacy of composition, which is the assumption that a property is true of the whole of something because it is true of a part of that thing. C.S. Lewis, who is largely credited with coming up with this argument, despite him never claiming to have invented it and it being found in earlier writings, explained that if our thoughts ultimately derive from atomic motions in the brain, they cannot be rational, as those motions are non-rational. And that is just straight up a fallacy of composition. A collection of things can have properties that any one of the things in that collection does not have by itself. One musical note by itself does not have either harmony or dissonance, but when played along with other notes, it can have either or both, depending on those other notes. Number 5 suffers.
Yes, if C.S. Lewis made that argument, it would be a fallacy of composition. But notice he didn't do that. This is a straw man. You rephrase the argument to say that they're arguing that the whole is different than the parts. That's not what he's arguing. He's arguing in terms of causality. You can clearly see it in the premises. Non-rational causes are always going to give rise to non-rational causes. There's a chain of non-rational there. You're never going to get the opposite out of that. It's like if there's a chain of material causes, everything will be material. You don't get to, so it would be a fallacy of composition if that's the way C.S. Lewis was arguing. That's not the way he's arguing. He's arguing from causality, which is different. So yeah.
He really likes the composition division fallacy, doesn't he?
He's going to use it a lot more. And again, these are all straw man arguments because no one is arguing from parts. Oh, all the parts are not rational, therefore the whole isn't rational.
Yeah.
Yes, but where do we see that argument here? That's a straw man. That's a basic straw man.
You find it in the formulations that he's giving, even though he says earlier in the video, I like to give the strongest formulations of the arguments.
It clearly isn't. I mean, it's very clearly this is a straw man because you don't see anywhere in this argument he's arguing from parts. Again, where is rationality going to come out of non-rational causes? And then the conclusion, of course, is that therefore it cannot be a good reason to accept naturalism. So naturalism or materialism is likely to be false. And then they make a abductive move to say that theism is a better explanation. It can account for this. We would expect reasoning capabilities to exist if naturalism is true. So, it's kind of like planting this evolutionary argument against naturalism one step up. Because if you read Victor Reppert, he actually argues theism is a better account of this. But again, it's more abductive. It's not so much more like a deductive proof, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the argument from consciousness here. This is one I have used.
Depending on those other notes. Number 5 suffers from a similar issue. It is the argument from consciousness. Essentially, our conscious subjective experiences exist. Even if you are only aware of your own, you are aware of it, and this is undeniable. These experiences cannot be reduced to physical processes. The brain can be described in physical terms, but a physical explanation of a cascade of stimulus-response reactions does not explain what it is like to actually have subjective experiences. If consciousness is not physical, then explaining the world only in terms of the physical will leave you with an incomplete explanation. The best explanation for non-physical consciousness is the existence of a non-physical mind or soul, and that is given to us by God. Once again, we have the fallacy of composition. Just because physical processes don't have subjective experiences doesn't mean that a cascade of physical processes is inherently incapable of resulting in subjective experiences. But it's also an argument from ignorance. We do not yet understand how the processes of the brain produce consciousness. Therefore, it must be God.
Okay, that's not an argument from ignorance. He would be.
And that's not even an argument.
That it isn't the argument, but what he's trying to say is it's a God of the gaps. An argument from ignorance is if you say something is true because it hasn't been proven false, or something is false because it hasn't been proven true. That's an argument from ignorance. What he said is not an argument from ignorance. I want to just make sure everyone's aware. What he's trying to say is that it's an God of the gaps argument, which is not the actual argument. But let's let him finish here.
Honestly, the only reason this one is higher up on the list than the argument from reason is because consciousness is less well understood than reason. Even if we were all a bunch of philosophical zombies, it would still make sense from an evolutionary perspective that our behaviors would indicate at least a basic understanding of reality, because such behaviors carry with them a survival advantage. But unfortunately, bringing up an unanswered question does not actually point to the existence of a God. It merely points to a deficiency in our understanding of something. In fact, the next three arguments are all in their place on the list, largely for the same reason. They all wind up being some version of, we don't know an explanation for X, therefore God. Accordingly,
yeah, no, hold on.
I've ordered them more based on how frequently they seem to be used by apologists rather than their robustness.
So anyway, before we get to the next one, okay, so any time an atheist argues like that, they're assuming naturalism. I mean, they are. They're assuming. All right, we already know naturalism is true, so you just can't say God is the explanation, because we already know naturalism is true. You're using circular reasoning, actually, and they don't realize this, but that's a subtle sleight of hand that's always employed. Okay, well, hold on. No, you're assuming naturalism. Any evidence that points to God can't be evidence for God, because we already know naturalism is true. That's what we're getting out of this. And I don't think a lot of atheists realize it when they do that. It's not a good argument, but go on. I know you.
Just to kind of bounce off what you're saying, it's actually, I'm tempted to say it's actually special pleading when people try to use God of the gaps objections to these types of arguments, because in my experience, anecdotally speaking, when people argue from consciousness or anything like that, all they're really saying is, hey, here's some data. My hypothesis is theism. Here's how theism generates expectations of this observation. Therefore, this is evidence for theism. If that was a God of the gaps argument or bad reasoning, then guess what? Like, scientific reasoning is gone. Right? Like, if we're just not allowed to come up with a hypothesis to explain some data, why is then say goodbye to science? Yeah, I have some slides on this, but I'll try to kind of keep it fast. First of all, the argument from consciousness rests on something called the hard problem of consciousness. Okay, guess who kind of brought this forth? Was it Christian apologist Mike?
Nope.
No, it was David Chalmers, a materialist philosopher who coined the term hard problem and started arguing from it. Dr. Joshua Rasmussen, in his book, Who Are You Really?, says the hard problem of consciousness at the most general level is the problem of explaining consciousness in terms of purely third-person material states. Some philosophers have argued that 1, everything must be explicable in terms of more fundamental third-person material states, but that 2, consciousness cannot be explicable purely in terms of third-person material states. And Viced Rhino tries to actually kind of get to that, but he ignores one of the fundamental parts of the discussion here, because he says that like these third-person states can't be reduced to material states. But there's another issue of identity. Are these third-person states identical to the first-person states? And if you can't have one or the other, then it is just impossible for physicalism to be true, right? So here's just this is and again, if you guys want to read the book, this is a really good book to read on this. Here's just one thing to think about. Can a swirl of sand, a particle of sand, be sad? No. What distinguishes feeling things from non-feeling things? Well, we can test that. So just imagine, this is called the direct comparison test, and it's something you have the ability to do. Can you feel sadness? Yes. Does the particle of sand have the ability to do that? No. And I'll kind of skip some of this stuff because this is from slides that I've had for an event.
Well, I mean, like, here's the issue: is like the mental world is totally unlike the physical. I mean, mental
Right.
sensations, qualia, this is not things we find in the physical. There is this huge divide, which David Chalmers has talked about. And then theists come along, we go, okay, what is a better explanation for this? That the material somehow brought about something completely unlike what it is, or that consciousness would have a personal source? And when you're done, I'll present an argument.
Yeah. So just really quickly, somebody might still say, well, like, okay, but like the brain can still give rise to consciousness, but the brain is made up of the same type of stuff that the sand is, fundamentally speaking, right?
Mhm.
So can I make the sand, and this is one of the ways that you avoid fallacy composition division fallacies too, right? The principle of relevant differences. If I add more grains of sand to the sand swirl, is that going to make it be able to feel sadness? If I start making it swirl, if I start chaining infinite amounts of it, like, is there anything I can do to the sand to actually make it feel something? And the answer is no.
Right.
So here's one argument. You can be introspectively aware of first-person sense aspects of feeling without being introspectively aware of spatial aspects of sand. Therefore, there is a difference between first-person sense aspects and spatial aspects of sand. If A is B, then there is no difference between A and B. Therefore, first-person sense aspects of feelings are not the same as spatial aspects of sand. In other words, these first person experiences that we have cannot be identical or reduced down to material states. So there has to be some sort of immaterial aspect to the mind. I know you got something that you want to bring up, so I'm just going to fast forward a little bit here. If you're not convinced by that, hey, guess what? You don't have to believe in the soul or immaterial part of the self here, because the argument from consciousness can still run even on a physicalist idea. Here's just a really simple way of putting it. The probability of conscious agents on the condition God exists is much higher than the probability of conscious agents on the condition atheism is true, even if we were merely physical. And evolution's not going to help you here, because again, it's just kicking the can back. Why are the features of reality such that evolution brought about conscious agents? On theism, not surprising. On atheism, still not going to be able to explain it. So I know you got stuff you want to say, so.
Well, I did a video about like 7 years ago or so called The Cosmic Conscious Argument for God's Existence. Go watch that video. Also watch 2 other videos that I did, which is The Emergent Universe. Watch that along this one, as well as a video, Mind or Matter, which is fundamental. Watch those 3 videos. But here's the basic argument. No one is saying we have consciousness, therefore God. Follow the logic here. Contingent minds have either a personal explanation or a natural explanation. Can you think of another one? If you're going to argue panpsychism, I'm going to argue that's either, depending on how you phrase it, that's either a natural or ultimately a personal explanation, because you're saying everything is consciousness, but I don't think it works. Premise 2, quantum mechanics and other fields of science imply the natural universe is emergent from consciousness. Okay. What does that follow? It follows from the fact that when we study the wave function, we can mathematically explain it. We can mathematically explain particles. We cannot mathematically explain measurement. Okay. They're collapse. Okay. And this is why physicists like Henry Stapp, John von Neumann have argued there has to be something else that causes collapse, and it ultimately goes back to consciousness, going through the von Neumann chain. You can see the videos that talk about that. So conclusion 1, the natural universe cannot be explained, cannot be the explanation of contingent minds. Why? Because contingent minds are necessary to bring about the existence of the physical. This is what we see through those scientific aspects. Premise 3, the explanation of the existence of conscious minds is personal. This personal source is what we call God. Therefore, God exists. And this is building off of J.P. Moreland's argument from consciousness, because his first premise is, I just borrowed his first premise. And then I just argued it from a different angle that he did. But similar to what Than was arguing, the way we understand the nature of consciousness, reality, shows us it does not emerge from physical. In fact, it seems the physical is contingent upon consciousness. This is one of the reasons I'm a dual aspect idealist. I don't think the physical is an actual substance we interact with. So I'm not a substance dualist. But if that's the case, you cannot use the physical to explain the emergence of consciousness. And we are still contingent minds, so we have to be contingent on something. It makes sense we're contingent on a larger mind. And I think this just logically flows from being an idealist. But based it is, yes. All right, let's do the teleological argument, and then we'll get to some super chats again. If you guys get them in now, I'll prioritize them based on the amount. But let's go to his next argument. This is a big one. I think this is like one of his longest sections, as you can see. So if you want to stop anywhere in the middle of this, Stan, just let me know.
Yeah, I'll probably pause this a few times because I don't want to miss stuff.
Okay, just start yelling at me.
So, at number 4, we've got the teleological argument. This one comes in various forms, but what it comes down to is some version of an aspect of the universe has the appearance of design, therefore the universe was designed, and God was that designer. Sometimes this will be at the very granular level, looking at biology, with DNA in particular, and marveling at how complex it all is. It's way too complex to have been the result of natural processes, so it must have been designed. Except the problem here is that simplicity is the hallmark of good design. When designing something, you don't want it to be any more complex than it needs to be in order to complete its task. And our DNA is way more complicated than it needs to be. It would be way more efficient if the genome were organized by chromosome, with closely related structures and functions being closer together on the genome. This could potentially allow for different types of cells in the body to only contain the DNA that they need for their job, rather than having redundant copies of the entire genome as they do now. It would also make it easier for researchers to isolate the genes responsible for various genetic diseases. The jumbled
Okay, there's a few things you already said that maybe we want to address. I don't have to put up slides for this, but first, notice right away, that he's focusing on a deductive proof style argument rather than some sort of inductive or Bayesian style argumentation here. So again, that objection only holds against deductive style proof type arguments, not probabilistic versions. I don't know anybody in the academic world that is arguing the earth is unique, therefore God, or the universe is perfect for life, therefore God, or anything like that. More often than not, the argument runs something like, hey, we just live in something called a life-permitting universe. And this life-permitting universe allows for agents to operate within a value-laden theater, like just able to interact with the features of the good, the true, the good, and the beautiful. This would entail, by the way, that there's negative states in the world, and they're just saying that the type of reality that we are seeing is congruent with what you would expect to see given God's existence per the fine-tuning parameters. As far as like the optimal thing that he kind of brings up, actually no, he brings up simplicity. I'm gonna just argue that simplicity is not the hallmark of a good design, because the hallmark of a good design is going to be context laden as well. In many cases, robustness, adaptability, fault tolerance, and all this other stuff are going to require some kind of redundancy. There's systems engineers that often prefer modular but inefficient designs because they allow for flexibility and evolutionary stability. So if God's creating a disjunctive universe rather than like God looking at his options of possible worlds he's going to pick, if God says, no, I'm not going to create just a possible world, I'm going to create the best kind of world, and then from that initial state, things are going to gradually unfold, well, that's going to require redundancy and things that are not as simple and are going to be a little bit complex, but for good reasons, grounded within value theory. I'll digress there.
Cool. Let's continue on.
Of our genome looks like something that was assembled through millions of years of trial and error rather than something that was designed. Indeed, that does seem to be the case. On the other end of the spectrum,
I would just really say, like, as someone who's a theistic evolutionist, see my video, was evolution inevitable? Because you can actually make some interesting inferences from that as well. That doesn't actually, it's not a slam dunk for non-theism.
we have the various fine-tuning arguments. The less sophisticated ones will focus on the solar system, talking about how the Earth is at the perfect distance from the sun. The magnetic field protects us from solar radiation. The moon is the perfect size to give us solar eclipses. Jupiter is perfect for protecting the Earth from asteroid impacts, etc., etc. This one is countered simply by observing just how big the universe is. If we look at the Hubble Deep Field image taken in 1995, it was a long exposure of a tiny portion of the sky, an area that would be about the same size as the apparent size of a tennis ball that is 100 meters away from you. In this tiny portion of the sky, they imaged about 3,000 entire galaxies. The average galaxy has about 100 million stars in it, so that image alone has potentially 300 billion stars in it.
I'll just pull this up really quickly. If anybody's interested in the objection from size, or whatever you want to say, I have a video on my old channel actually addressing this, and believe it or not, it's actually tied with fine tuning.
Okay.
It's titled "The James Webb Space Telescope and God." I'll just put it in the chat for anybody interested.
Okay. Yeah, I would also say it was just an interesting fact. I think Alan Guth calculated the size of the universe based on the Big Bang, and he says the observable universe would be like the size of a light bulb in comparison to the whole universe, which would be like the size of Pluto. So in terms of comparison, what we've seen in terms of how big the universe is basically the observable universe. What we've observed is like the size of a light bulb in comparison to Pluto, which is mind-boggling to even think about.
And it only covered 1/24 millionth of the sky. The idea that so many stars exist in just that one tiny patch of space, and yet somehow the Earth is unique enough in its characteristics that no other planet like it could be found in the whole universe, thus necessitating a god creating it, just seems absurd. There is nothing physically impossible about how our solar system is set up, so given a large enough set of solar systems, we would expect to find others in similar configurations, even if it was incredibly rare. And so
I would agree with him for that part.
so the
Well,
conclusion
just really
is that
quickly,
life-
that counterintuitive result's going to arise here again. Just think about it. If we have a sample size that's big enough, of course we're going to have something that's going to be incredibly rare.
Mm-hmm.
Resurrection can count as something like that again, and I'm assuming he's not going to want to concede to that.
life evolves on planets that are capable of sustaining life, which, given the vast size of the universe, even if there's only a 1 in a billion chance of a life-sustaining solar system developing, that means there are around 300 such solar systems in the deep field image alone, which, remember, is a tiny patch of the entire sky. And this is why the more sophisticated versions go instead for the fine-tuning of the universe as a whole. Laws of physics and the physical constants of the universe are such that life can exist in it. We don't know why they would be what they are, therefore, a god must have made them that way. Aside from this being yet another argument from ignorance, there are still several.
It's not an argument from ignorance. Again, an argument from ignorance is saying something is true because it has not been proven false, and the reverse. So this is
Got the gaps.
Please look up fallacies before you use them.
Possible solutions. Firstly, we don't actually know whether the laws and constants could even be different. If it is not possible for them to be different than what they are, then no god is needed to make them what they are. Second, there are several cosmological models that deal with multiple universes, either sequentially or simultaneously, with these multiple universes having slightly different laws and constants. If one of those models is correct, then it just becomes a bigger version of the solar system form of the argument. Life exists in the universes where life can exist, purely because those are the ones where life can exist. Third, as it turns out, when you actually look at the research some of these scientists are doing, not only is it possible that life could exist in universes with slightly different laws and constants, but our universe isn't even the optimal universe for life. There are tweaks to the constants that would result in a universe that would be better for life than our current universe. So it may not be necessary to have a conscious being finely tune the universe, and even if it were, they didn't optimally tune the universe for whatever reason, leaving this argument seeming less impressive than it would be if the universe were actually perfect for life. What's more, I think this argument would actually work better if it were flipped on its head. After all, what kind of universe does an all-powerful god require in order to sustain life? Doesn't matter. He's all-powerful. It can be whatever universe he wants it to be. So a better argument for God would be if everything we learned about the universe pointed to the idea of life being impossible, and yet here we are, impossibly existing. Instead, we're left with the rather dull conclusion of life exists where it would be possible for life to exist without divine intervention, therefore, there must have been divine intervention. Which actually leads nicely into number 3, the cosmological.
Okay. So, I mean, here's the biggest issue with his response to fine tuning. He doesn't offer another explanation to counter theism. He just says, well, maybe we don't know. We don't know. Maybe the laws are physically necessary. Okay, yeah, that's a possibility, but do you have any evidence that is the case?
Well, even if they are necessary, here's the question, right? Why are they necessary? Are they necessary because they're like logically necessary, or are they metaphysically necessary because something more fundamental necessarily gives rise to them? All that's going to do is kick the can back, and now I'm just going to ask the question, well, why is the thing that necessarily gives rise to them a thing that is generating life-permitting parameters? It's just kicking the can back. And so I think that's a really bad objection.
Well, okay, so he brought up a study that we're not living in the most optimal universe. So I didn't know this study till Viced Rhino brought it up, but I do have a friend of mine who is kind of an expert on fine tuning. Name is Luke Barnes, the physicist. So I messaged him. I asked him about the study, and he gave me permission to share what he said. So I figured I would bring that up now. So here it is. So yes, I got to send him the video, send him the paper. Okay, so here's what he says. I refereed that paper. You'll note in the references to Barnes et al. Throughout. The extended discussion of figure 10 throughout the paper was at my request. They say, furthermore, in figure 10, we are concerned with the stellar component only, which is subject to the complex interplay of astrophysical processes and the evolution of the large-scale structure of the universe. In other words, the predictions are not perfectly precise because the astrophysics involved is complicated. In other words, this is not a slammed dunk. And they're only focusing on one fine-tuning aspect, as you can see, stellar components. Now he goes on to point this out. More importantly, fine-tuning is not optimal tuning.
Yeah.
It's exactly what I was going to say. No one said God exists because of optimal tuning. We've argued God exists because of fine tuning. That logically follows as the best explanation, and atheists have not offered a better. He says the point of the argument is to compare the probability of a life-permitting universe on theism to the probability of a life-permitting universe on naturalism. This objection compares our universe to another possible universe. On theism, our universe is somewhat near the peak. It's maybe not exactly at the peak, so dock us a few marks. But on naturalism, we would expect to be nowhere near the peak. We'd expect to be 120 orders of magnitude away from any value that would allow for any cosmic structure at all. Even on a multiverse model, the probability of a cosmological constant as small as ours is less than 0.05%, according to the abstract of the study, that is.
Yeah.
Though, as they note, this modeling is difficult to stay tuned for that answer to be redefined. So I thought that was an important point to bring up. As you can see, he gave me permission. So that's where we're at. This argument, Viced Rhino's reply is just missing the whole point of the fine tuning argument. It doesn't get us anywhere.
Yep.
And if anybody wants to, Luke Barnes also has some really great stuff on the puddle analogy, and he thoroughly debunks that. It doesn't work either. Again, the question is, what is more probable? We observe fine tuning. What's going to be a better explanation? Design or naturalism? Okay, naturalism is far more unlikely. And again, if you think naturalism is more likely, give us a better explanation of the data. Just don't tell me, well, we don't know. It could be X. It could be Y. It could be Z. Okay, why is that better than T for theism?
Yeah.
Explain it to me. If you don't, I'm going to insist that we have the best explanation of the data. Don't just appeal to the unknown. Okay.
Right. The puddle analogy or the anthropic objection too isn't even an objection to the argument. Like, imagine Mike got murdered and I'm asking the question, well, who murdered Mike? And somebody goes, well, why are you even trying to explain that? The only reason you're asking the question is because you're in a position to observe it in the first place. You're going to be like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, somebody died. In the same way, it's like, cool, good point. But like, this is still the best explanation of the observations we're making. So it's not an objection.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of misses on this for sure. What else was I going to say on that? Yeah. The way I give this analogy in terms of what atheists are doing. Imagine we're on the riverbank and we need to get across the river. Like, we got to get across. We're being chased by a murderer or something. And I say, I got a boat here. Let's get in the boat. It's going to get us across the river. And the atheist comes and goes, yeah, but there's a hole there. The oar looks kind of like old. That one panel there is kind of like decaying. I don't think so. And I said, well, do you have another boat? No, but maybe there's one up the stream. Maybe there's not. I don't see any other boats. I know this boat will get us across the river. Let's get in and go. Okay. Atheists are not offering us another boat when we have evidence for God's existence. They're just saying, I don't think that boat will get us across. Okay. I think it will. If you don't have a better explanation, I'm getting in the boat and going. You can stay here, but I'm going. So they're not actually really attacking our arguments. They're just at the end of the day saying they're not convinced. We don't know. There could be other explanations. Yeah, there could be. Give me one and show me why that's a better explanation. Ready to continue on?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's do the cosmological, which he doesn't spend a lot of time on. I'm surprised because that tends to be the theist's favorite argument.
I skipped. I listened to a little bit of it and I skipped it at once. He started getting to objections because I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't.
Okay.
Cosmological argument. This one isn't so much concerned with the properties of the universe being fine-tuned for life, but instead suggests that since the universe appears to have had a beginning, there must have been a god to make it begin. There are several versions of it, but all of them essentially break down to an argument from ignorance again. We don't
He needs to learn fallacies for the love of God.
know what caused the universe, therefore God was the cause. They try to get there through various types of reasoning, like the cause of space, time, and matter must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial for reasons, all while ignoring the work that cosmologists have done in the realm of figuring out the origins of the universe. Also,
Okay, tell me you've never read anything on the cosmological argument without telling me you've never read anything on the cosmological argument. When you say reasons, okay, well, there's actually some really good reasons that philosophers have offered. It, like, are you saying you don't even know what they are?
This isn't even like the point that atheist philosophers are going to contest most of the time. They're like, Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, if at time t, space, time, and matter begin to exist for the first time, then obviously, like, whatever made them cannot be made of those things because they didn't exist prior to that.
Yeah.
This isn't where how they attack the argument. I'm just like, I
Hmm.
was astounded by this. This is why I skipped past this.
Hey, listen, Red in the chat. I got to make this interesting. If I just sit here and I'm all boring, no one's going to pay attention. You got to have a little drama in the voice, okay?
Yeah.
Calm down. All right, this is part of the shtick. Anyway, continue on.
Also, most forms of this argument suffer from special pleading. There cannot be an infinite regress of causes, therefore there was a first cause, and this cause was God. What?
Did he seriously just say that's special pleading?
How there's a difference between saying everything needs a cause except for God. That would be special pleading.
Right.
It's not special. Like, let me ask just Vice Rhino, if you're listening, would it be special pleading if somebody argues that there cannot be an infinite succession of causes, and then somebody goes, the first cause was a quantum fluctuation?
Yes, obviously. Yes. Obviously. The first, that's totally special
So
pleading.
insert any other non-theistic theory to explain what the first cause was.
That's right, Graham Oppie. Everything you've written on this is
right.
Special pleading. Vice Rhino said all your books arguing for the natural first cause, special pleading. Got him. And there has to be a first cause. I like this analogy. If I say I need to borrow that book from you, and you say, well, I don't have it, my friend has it, I gotta go get it from him. So you go to your friend, and he goes, well, I don't have it, I gotta get it from my friend. And there's an infinite regress of friends. Does the book exist? No.
Yes.
Shut up. Don't ruin the analogy. No, it does not exist. That's the point. There's no substance there in an infinite regress. You're not explaining anything. There is no explanation.
Right.
Why doesn't God need a cause?
Especially just dorky moment. I'm sorry, but especially because even if you haven't, like, if this goes beyond causal formulations like the Kalam into like contingent formulations of cosmological arguments, but like even if you were to grant that there is an infinite succession of causes and effects in this universe, and this universe is past eternal, even if you do grant that, we can still ask the question, why do we live in this universe instead of a different kind of universe? Like, why isn't a green universe? Like, even if it's eternal, it's still going to be contingent. So
therefore there was a first cause, and this cause was God. Why doesn't God need a cause? Special pleading. That's why.
I'm done. He literally said he did the thing. He did the thing. He again, this is clearly a straw man. No one says there is no cosmological argument where beyond like maybe some backwater guy in a swamp who says everything has a cause. The argument is always every contingent thing has a cause. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. No cosmological argument that is published by a philosopher will say everything has a cause. If that was the case, yes, it would be special pleading. Vice Rhino is straw manning cosmological arguments here.
No, but he's presenting the strongest formulations.
Sure, yeah. by implying right then and there that the argument is everything has a cause. Good God.
And when the argument is reformulated to get away from the special pleading, it becomes
no.
Hey, Vice Rhino, we're models of evolution reformulated to get like rid of issues.
You see, there's special pleading.
Like, sure, you update your models and you update your argumentation and revise your beliefs as you come across different objections and reasons to disconfirm them. That's just good science and good reasoning.
Well, look,
unless it's religiously significant. Sorry,
the argument was never reformulated. Atheists just misunderstood it, and then we pointed out, no, we've never said everything has a cause. And they go, oh, look, you see, they have reformulated to avoid the objection. How pathetic! No, you guys just never actually understood the argument, and this video is evidence of that.
It becomes so weak that it doesn't even get you to a nebulous deistic God. That's the Kalam version. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe had a cause. Even if we ignore the equivocation that's going on with the phrase begin to exist, the best this does is get us to a cause for the universe. And like, Yeah, I agree. The beginning of the universe probably had a cause. Now, let's let the theoretical physics nerds figure that one out, because there ain't no way I'm going to figure any of that shit out. But to back it up,
Why would you appeal to them? They're explaining what they're explaining things in the universe. They're explaining the universe or how it works. You need to go into metaphysics to do. Should go to philosophers. Like going to a cosmologist, that doesn't make sense. Like this is a philosophical issue. This is a metaphysical issue. Cosmologists are just dealing with cosmological models. Science is not going to be able to do what metaphysics is able to do here. So like that just shows me you don't understand how these arguments work and what subject field they're even in.
back it up for a bit. I said that the argument equivocated on the phrase begin to exist.
Oh,
what does that mean? Well,
elaborates on that.
equivocation is when you
What'd you say?
I was going to say, does he elaborate on when he says it equivocates? Because there's a few ways to interpret that.
Let's see.
it out. But to back it up for a bit, I said that the argument equivocated on the phrase begin to exist. What does that mean? Well, equivocation is when you subtly switch what definition for a word or phrase you're referring to mid-argument in order to point to a conclusion that wouldn't be indicated if you were consistent. So in the first premise, everything that begins to exist has a cause. We are talking about beginning to exist here in the sense that we observe within the universe, which, because of the law of conservation of energy, is not a true beginning, but is a rearrangement of existing matter and energy. But when the argument moves on to the beginning of the universe in the second premise, now we're talking about the very beginning of matter and energy, which from cosmology, it's not actually clear if it had a beginning in the sense that there was once a time with no matter and energy. So not only does the argument flip-flop between definitions, causing it to run afoul of the fallacy of composition, where we assume that things within the universe require causes, therefore the universe as a whole also requires a cause, it has also not even been established that the universe actually did begin in the sense that this argument needs it to in order for it to work. Number two.
That was such a jumbled mess. I don't even know where to begin.
So there's a lot to say here. One, the causal principle is a metaphysical principle. It's not just talking strictly about material origins. That's one thing to consider. Somebody might object to this and say, well, the only thing we've observed are material causes rearranging pre-existing mereological symbols into new things. But these aren't new things. Nothing's actually created ex nihilo there or anything like that. That's the objection there is going to be the principle of material causation. Mike, as an idealist, you should love that objection because you know what that means? That just means that idealism is true.
Right. Right.
So that's one thing to consider. If anybody wants a deeper dive into the next thing I'm about to say really quickly, I have another video on my old channel titled, Does Matt Dillahunty Exist? And the basic idea is if you are going to make like the mereological nihilist objection to the causal principle, here's something to consider. One is the fact that just like in chemistry and in physics, mereological nihilism is basically like unanimously rejected because we have new things coming up and yada, yada, yada. Now, here's another good reason to think about it, though. You at some point began to exist. Now, if you're a skeptic and you don't believe in the soul or anything like that, that means that you think that you are reduced or identical down to material states. But the material states that existed prior to you existing are not identical to you. And so the long and short of it is, you're going to have to be in a limit of this. You're actually going to have to say that consciousness itself does not exist if you're going to say mereological nihilism is true and the causal principle is false because of that. Because you'd have to say that you're identical to those things. Did you always exist or did you never exist? That's a short version of it. Okay. Go check out the video if you...
This is not an equivocate. Again, the objections Viced Rhino are bringing up are never objections I've seen to the cosmological argument in literature. Unless I'm missing something, which I guess could be the case, but then they would just be really, really bad arguments. No, we're not equivocating because no, the first premise is not of Craig's argument is not everything in the universe that begins to exist has a cause. You just straw man the argument. It's everything that begins to exist in or beyond the universe. Again, if we go to the idea of consciousness, which has not been shown to be physical, we can see causal things happening within our own consciousness, for example. So again, this doesn't work. If we're going into metaphysics, the same logic would apply. Logic, same thing. I mean, so like this is not an issue. And then again, if you just straw man it to be that, then you can say it's a fallacy of composition. But that was never the argument. So he's accusing it of being a fallacy because he's rephrased it in this straw man that he set up. That's not how this works. Everything that begins to exist has a cause, regardless. I personally prefer the Leibnizian contingency argument. I think that's a better argument. It's also in the Blackwell's Companion, Alexander Pruss's chapter. My favorite cosmological argument. I think by far, except one other one I've worked on where I argue like the emergent universe argument. What else did I use to go? I've called it. I've had to give it 2 names: emergent universe argument and digital physics argument.
Yeah.
You can watch my video, the emergent universe. You'll see that cosmological argument because I think it makes a much more likely case that God exists. But needless to say, this is just missing the whole point. If you just assume naturalism, which Viced Rhino did, well, everything in the universe has a cause. Okay, so then, but you're assuming that everything is just the universe. You've assumed that conclusion to straw man the argument and then accuse it of a fallacy of composition. There are so many issues in that short little segment of what he said, which again makes me wonder if he's read things like, if you want to study argument for God's existence, you should read this book. I'm not saying I agree with everything in it. I find problems in it that I don't entirely agree with. But I mean, like, at least understand there are reasons we say that God is the best explanation when it comes to contingency. See my video, the Leibnizian cosmological argument, for more on that. Here, like, again, if the universe has a cause, this is what Craig does. I'm just going to try to, present his argument here. Okay, if the universe has a cause, then it has to be something incredibly powerful. The first cause also has to be able to act upon itself. It has to be sentient. Non-sentient things do not act upon themselves to create other things. So the first cause, whatever it has to be able to move, so to speak. It has to be able to act upon itself to bring other things into existence. This is best explained by appealing to a sentient or conscious being. Non-material things aren't able to do that. That is less parsimonious. And again, check out Richard Swinburne's book, The Existence of God. Those are great books, for example. Sijuwati has some great stuff on this. I mean, there's a lot more than what he is presenting here. And this just doesn't seem right. All right, let's do the moral argument, and then I'll get to some super chats. Because actually, let's do some super chats now because I've been putting them off. So let me get to some of these ones that have been why for a while. Any resources to read more on Q? I cannot think of any more. So unless Than does it, moving on. What's your opinion on Kant's objection to the ontological argument, mainly as reasoning existence is not a predicate? Yeah, I agree. That's why later philosophers have reformulated it around necessity, not existence. So that's how that's avoided. Love your metaphysics series, but was dissatisfied by how P1 of the moral argument was arrived to. How do we prove moral realism is necessarily true? You make an argument for moral realism, which we'll do here in a little bit. So we'll do that in a bit here.
Based.
And again, you can't prove moral realism, but you can infer that it is true from the available data. Do you have any tips on how to retain information from reading? I'm starting to get into some of the book recommendations on your website. Yeah, read with a highlighter. If you notice, if you go through my book here on the Blackwell's Companion, see highlights? You see highlights, Than?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's not what helps me retain the information.
Helps me a lot because then I go back and I read my highlights and I remember it better.
My tip is to immediately create something with the information you've just digested. Like the moment you create something, if you look at some of the psychological literature of learning and stuff, the moment you create something with the information you've gathered is the moment where like it gets solidified. And I don't know the psychological terminology here or anything like that, but yeah, create something.
Why did Than say Old Testament Christophany and incarnation are different? If it's his body, then shouldn't it be the same since he's timeless?
So one, I don't hold to divine timelessness. I think God is in time. The humanity. But also Old Testament, even if you are going to hold to timelessness, presumably you wouldn't look at your theology and say that Christ was always incarnate. The incarnation is when God took on flesh. And so I think that happens in a place in time. In the New Testament, the Christophany is more better explained as an embodiment or pseudo embodiment, depending on what you take ancient Israelite ontology to be.
Do you hold a theory of time?
Yeah.
Oh God. All right. Well, he's gone now. I'm sorry, folks.
Hold on. I'm an atheist, and I think time is a substance.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that later. Argument from beauty would prove design, but not a specific designer, right? How would you make the jump to the Christian God? No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We would use specific arguments like the resurrection argument. I mean, and this is one of the things that I would say Viced Rhino kind of does in the video is like, I thought watching this video, he's just trying to refute theism, but then he brings in Christianity randomly. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Like these are arguments for just a God, deism. Like, we're not saying you can prove Christianity with these arguments. So that was, again, another weird issue he brought up.
Yeah. You could theoretically just say that like Christian theism or something like it is most congruent with an argument from beauty, because you can argue to the aesthetic values of the Christian story in general. But
does the existence of aliens change Christianity? No, I think
No.
if you watch my video, was evolution inevitable? I would say that actually, no. I think that would actually support theistic idealism. But I wouldn't challenge Christianity on my view. What evidence leads you to accept process structuralism over neo-Darwinian evolution? Are there any problems for Christianity under the latter view?
Nice try,
not
Putin. Russian spy.
Oh, no, okay. Listen here, Mr. Russia. I don't think there are, but see, my video was evolution inevitable. There's just so much data to support more of a structuralist understanding of evolution. John the Press Spider for the evolutionary argument against naturalism. Why can't our cognitive faculties be selected for the truth and naturalism still be true? Is it because naturalism has no inherent rationality? Yes. So naturalism has no inherent rationality in material processes. There's no reason to think intentionality, consciousness, or rationality would come out of those kinds of processes. You evolve to survive in an environment, to fill a niche in an environment, and how you will fill that niche. There's nothing in filling that niche, which means you have to know truth, be rational, know truthhood from falsehood. So why can our cognitive faculty be selected for the truth? Because that would never be the aim. It's really the blind watchmaker, ironically. The aim is just to get something to survive in a specific environmental niche, not to actually know the true nature of reality, not to know 2 + 2 = 4. If, again, it's about that random aspect of the random genes you an offspring gets allows it to survive because it thinks let's say, I think Plantinga uses, let's say an animal thinks that it needs to play hide and seek from predators because it wants to constantly play this fun game. Well, that would help survive, but that wouldn't be prone to truth because it thinks it's playing a game when really it's just avoiding being eaten. And so, that's the main problem with naturalism, is that it actually doesn't produce organisms that would be tuned in for truth or not. God of the gaps, the fallacy of giving a theistic argument that atheists can't answer.
Yeah.
Well said. It's well said, sir. Yes. Very well said. Thank you for becoming a channel member as well. Appreciate the super chats if you come in that. All right. So we've got a couple more super chats to go through. I will go through them, but I will say this. If you guys get us either 10 more super chats or $100 in super chats, I will preview the upcoming video, How Christianity Created Human Rights, for the first time ever. And I will play a couple minutes of it. So if you guys want to see that now, please start getting at least 10 in or $100 worth. So if one person just wants to be like, hey, everybody, I will preview that video for you guys. So just keep that in mind. All right. Matt said we should do stuff like that to help grow the channel. So I'm doing it.
I like it.
Anyway.
I like it. Whenever I join Big John Steele's lives, I always make jokes about people donating to prank him and send him into a higher tax bracket.
There we go. I would love to be in a higher tax bracket. All right. Let's play the moral argument here.
Is the moral argument. Essentially, objective morality exists. Humans cannot be the source of objective morality because of all the different moral opinions we have. Therefore, a god must exist to be that objective standard of morality. This argument relies on the assumption that objective morality actually does exist, which is not something that has been demonstrated at this time. Apologists can often be found using shock tactics to get people to agree.
Okay, so yeah, it's not been demonstrated, but that seems like you're just assuming logical positivism is true. And moral realism, we've argued, is the default position, actually. And this isn't coming from me. This is coming from atheist philosophers. So Richard Boyd, in the Sciences, this is what he says. Richard Boyd, in Essays on Moral Realism, How to be a Moral Realist, he says, in the sciences, we decide between theories on the basis of observations, which have an important degree of objectivity. It appears that in moral reasoning, moral intuitions play the same role which observations do in science. We test general moral principles in moral theories by seeing how their consequences conform or fail to conform to our moral intuitions about particular cases. David Brink says, in the Autonomy of Ethics, our moral thinking and discourse might be systematically mistaken, but this would be a revisionary conclusion to be accepted only as a result of extended and compelling arguments that the commitments of ethical objectivity are unsustainable. In the meantime, we should treat the objectivity of ethics as a kind of default assumption or working hypothesis. In other words, our moral intuitions tell us moral realism is true. There are objective moral values and duties. Until a skeptic or someone else comes along with enough data to show that is false, this is the default position. The way moral values and duties manifest in reality have an objective sense. This is why we apply justice. Okay? We apply justice to serious crimes. Even little crimes, there has to be some, at least, cultural aspect of justice. You tell a lie, you need to come clean and tell the truth, for example. Other aspects do not manifest in that way. So if you have an epistemic difference than I do, we don't think that applies justice. So like if you I don't know, if you disagree and you think a theory of time is true, which is ridiculous, I don't think that applies justice. But but moral values and duties manifest in a different way in reality, that they necessarily imply justice. They have this objective status. This is not just something coming from evolution, because taste preferences come from evolution, but we don't think people who violate taste preferences require justice or they're violating some sort of objective moral law. There's something about the way our moral intuitions point us to objective moral values and duties, having this objective status, which suggests that this is the default position, and the burden is on the skeptic to suggest something like a non-cognitive theory is true, or error theory is true, or, a whole host of other different views. So, rant over.
Agree to objective morality, and they don't have a whole lot of imagination apparently, because the usual go-to is to ask if we can agree that torturing babies for fun is really wrong.
We know that it's objectively wrong to torture infants for fun.
Every one of us knows that torturing an innocent baby for fun is wrong.
Do we understand that torturing babies for fun is really wrong?
That it's truly always wrong to torture a baby for fun.
Only a monster would refuse to agree with such a statement, so obviously whoever they're talking to will agree with the statement. Except therein lies the problem. They're appealing to an emotional reaction in order to say something is objectively true. However I may feel about the torturing of babies is irrelevant if it is actually objectively wrong. And honestly, for the Christian apologists in particular, I think the go-to is torturing babies for fun, because that's the only obviously immoral thing they can think of with sufficient shock value that isn't something that their God is guilty of doing.
Okay, before we get to that, that's not what they're arguing. They're arguing from, again, the moral objective status of that thing. They're not just saying, don't you feel that this is bad? So this is, again, straw manning the position. It is objectively wrong. And the reason why we believe that, it's not just from feelings. We have a logical reason to believe it is wrong. Mm-hmm. We have an intuition that it is wrong. Intuitions and feelings are not the same thing. Let me see if I can find this quote I just thought of from Ruth Schaefer Landau, who's, again, not a Christian, mind you.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say on that?
No, I'm just anticipating the objection of, oh, so it's just your feelings. Whatever happened to facts over feelings? Conservative alt-right Christians, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. That's the typical response I get from atheists that echo the sentiments Viced Rhino is echoing right now.
So Ruth Schaefer Landau says this: intuition is not a belief or a judgment or any dosastic statement. It's not a tendency or a disposition to endorse a proposition. It's not a guess. It's not a hunch. It's not a supposition. It's not a faculty of any sort. Neither is it infallible. Neither is it epistemically justified or unjustified. It is a conscious experiential state that has content. It has propositional content that is representational. Okay, so beliefs are formed either by accepting or building on intuitions or by rejecting intuitions. Intuitions do not require thinking necessarily. They often are how we act without thinking. So I have an intuition someone exists in Vancouver, Canada. That's a good intuition. And until I'm shown otherwise, I will hold to that intuition. So intuitions are a lot more complex in terms of moral realism. Now, if you're going to, intuitions will be defined differently in every field of philosophy, which is just the problem of philosophy, but that's how we would define it when we're talking about moral realism.
Is genocide objectively wrong? Well, if I say yes to that, then they have to explain how the source of objective morality was capable of doing something that is objectively wrong, right? Jesus was born because the Holy Ghost raped a teenager.
We've tackled that so many times.
Yeah, see the stream we did a couple weeks ago with Joel Correcco, who will be back on the channel soon, by the way.
Is objectively wrong, right? Jesus was born because the Holy Ghost raped a teenager. Even
dog.
That's right, folks. Viced Rhino has not read the Gospel of Luke. The Holy Spirit graped Mary. That's why she was a virgin when Jesus was born, guys. Remember, because tell me you haven't read the Bible without telling me you haven't read the Bible.
Is this real?
That was something.
Am I in the early 2000s? What was that show on MTV? Like Pranked or something like that? Like, am I in that show right now?
You're such an old person. That old show Pranked. You mean Punked?
Am I on Punked right now? Like, is this happening?
Okay, so obviously that's nowhere. There was no intercourse because she was a virgin. We're not Mormons, guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Even just torturing babies on its own can't be used because God once punished King David for raping a woman and then murdering her husband by torturing his baby to death. So
doesn't say that.
Mike, does it? Yeah, I was just going to ask you, does 2 Samuel say that God tortured the baby?
No, he's making an inference. And again, I would remind people of stuff I've said numerous times. Oftentimes, God is given credit for things he allows to happen. See, 1 Chronicles, the death of Saul. God is given credit even though Saul commits suicide. Exodus 5, God is given credit even though Pharaoh is responsible.
So they have to add for fun to the end of it in order to make it something that the being that they claim is the source of objective morality has not done himself. And so that really is the main problem with the moral argument, in my opinion. Sure, if you could prove that there was an objective standard of morality, then I might be persuaded to believe in something that was capable of being that standard, but it sure as hell wouldn't be the Abrahamic God, because that guy violates just about every moral in the book, and he's supposed to have written the book. But as it stands, it looks like most people make their moral decisions based on their feelings, not based on careful consideration of all the pros and cons of behaving in accordance with some moral code. So finally, we reach number...
I would say that's just completely false.
Yeah.
I think we do reason. There is such a thing as moral reasoning. It's a whole field in philosophy. Not sure why he thinks
to be also like a subconscious aspect of like folk reasoning when it comes to ethics.
Yeah, like this is where the whole system of justice comes from, because we're reasoning through cases and what the punishment should be based on the crime, and like it's not feelings. Like no one's going into a court of law going, "Well, I feel that he should get." Like this, I mean, man, it's something. And again, but he did say if we can show moral realism is true, then he would believe in God, which I thought was a very, very honest of him. I appreciate that. But yeah, not a very good reply to the moral argument. Again, but I see my video, Moral Realism, a Defense. I think there's plenty good reasons to believe in moral realism. The skeptic has not met the burden to show that these intuitions are wrong. The way that moral values and duties manifest in reality, they have an objective sense. Unlike other senses we have, like all sorts of senses, like epistemic senses. So this does not.
Yeah, I mean,
not work.
It's no secret that I don't agree with like deductive formulations of the moral argument, and all of these are horrible objections to the argument. Like, there's so much, in my opinion, there's better objections to this. That
for sure, there are very good objections to the moral argument that need addressed. This ain't it.
He hasn't touched any of them.
I would even be curious if he knows the different meta-ethical views, because he seems to be suggesting moral meta-ethics is just a non-cognitivist view, but I don't think because he's talking about feelings.
Yeah, and
generally when people are saying that, they're assuming the non-cognitivist view of meta-ethics is true, like emotivism, for example. But yeah. More research needs to be done. Anyway, let's continue to his last argument.
Number 1, and that one is, drum roll please, personal experience. This one takes the top spot because I just cannot tell someone who has had a personal experience that their experience was for sure not God. If there is a God and he deigned to give this person a personal experience, how can I say that's not what happened? It wasn't my experience, but until such a time as this God decides to grace me with a similar experience, all I can do is observe that personal experiences are fairly ubiquitous among religions, and they almost always confirm the religion that the person already believed in, and in the rare cases where they don't, it is 100% of the time a religion that that person is familiar with. So this is the strongest argument.
I would also say that's not always the case. So, for example, Ish of Arabia, he was just on Pints with Aquinas. He's an ex-Muslim from Egypt. He said he had a dream of Jesus being on the cross with 2 other crosses before he even knew anything about what Christianity taught. And there's also all sorts of other experiences from other Muslims. Like there was a guy, a Salafi, who was part of a terrorist organization in Iraq. I've seen his testimony. Similar things as well. He was shown things that he didn't know existed. Now, you could say maybe they had some experience somewhere that maybe could explain it, but I mean, like, yeah, but here's the thing about argument from personal experience. I remember what did you do?
I was reaching for a book.
All right, well, that was pathetic. That was really bad.
I'm sorry.
Here's the thing I would say. Like, so Steve Dillon, he's now a Christian. I had him on my channel in November, interview him about his personal experience. He said he experienced Jesus. He became a Christian. He used to be a polytheist. And when he was a polytheist, he used this argument, not the way Viced Rhino is using it, but in the amount of personal experiences we have should at least suggest the supernatural is real. And I would say, yeah, given the amount that cultures and people have had. I mean, I think like 80% of people have they've experienced the supernatural in one way or another. So like, if that's the case, I think that's at least a good indication that there is at least something beyond the natural and people are experiencing it. I'm not saying that's a proof. I'm just saying in terms of probability, that's probably more likely, but go on.
I'm not going to dig into this, but chapter 13 of Swinburne's book, The Existence of God. If you just think that the argument from personal experience is just something that can be condensed down to, some people felt some stuff that they interpreted to be God or confirming of their own religious traditions, therefore God exists, you have no clue how deep that argument goes. I actually think this should be on the number 1 spot because I think it is a really, really powerful piece of evidence. But I think understanding the arguments takes a lot of time and dedication to actually get into understanding them.
Biggest argument.
Yeah.
Not because it is even slightly convincing, but because of the technicality that it cannot quite be as soundly refuted as all the other ones. Bit anticlimactic, but here we are. One of them had to be the best, and none of them are particularly good, so we're stuck with what we got.
Yeah, we're stuck with. They're not really good when you straw man them constantly. I totally agree with you there. I think we'll end there and get to some super chats. So we got a really generous $100 super chat. I just want to say thank you so much,
Based.
Joel, for the generous super chat. And because of this generous super chat, I'm going to preview the upcoming video here now because you are awesome. I appreciate the support. We definitely still need it. If you guys want to donate, please consider donating below. The link is right down there. We still need more support to get Than full time.
Speaking
But
of
for now,
really quickly, the Discord server is launching next month for public, but I don't know how I'm gonna have the time for this, to be honest with you. I'll make time. I will sacrifice an hour of sleep here and there. We'll be launching a Minecraft server.
oh God.
And if you're a supporter, you will have priority. You'll have priority for deciding your land that you'll be designated.
I don't even know what you're saying.
What
What is happening?
Where are you? Like in Minecraft, there's a world, right? And then you build in the world. But in order to not have land disputes amongst the members of the Minecraft server, we're going to have assigned territories for people. So
Okay.
if you are a supporter or want to have priority access to land in Minecraft, become a supporter, because that's really cool. But also like tons of other cool stuff, obviously, too, right? Like you're funding actual academic research, videos, and Mike and I being able to do a bunch of really cool stuff. So
So speaking of videos you've helped fund, here is the video coming out for donors this Sunday.
With the rise of secularism, many human rights have been under attack, like freedom of speech, freedom to self-defense, and freedom to privacy.
it's illegal to display Nazi symbolism, a swastika, or deny the Holocaust. That's clear. Is it a crime to insult somebody in public?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And it's a crime to insult them online as well?
Yes.
The fine could be even higher.
How's that secularism working for you, Europe?
The offence of incitement to racial hatred involves publishing or distributing material which is insulting or abusive, which is intended to or likely to start racial hatred. So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence.
God, I love America. Oh, God.
The more and more we move away from our Christian foundations, the more it seems that human rights are threatened. Meanwhile, we are told Christians are the real authoritarians who want to remove our human rights. But the historical reality is much different. Without Christianity, human rights would probably not have been known as we have them now. Despite what many say, the belief in human rights is not something that is recognized across all cultures. Modern human rights came out of Judeo-Christian ideas, and without the biblical texts, we may never have discovered them. This is the story of how Christianity gave us human rights.
I'm going to play a little bit more.
Human rights are understood as inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. They traditionally include the right to life, liberty, property, privacy, free speech, religion, self-expression, self-defense, and the pursuit of happiness, as well as freedom from slavery, torture, or unjust harm. In the ancient world, there was no concept of human rights for all people. Some cite the Cyrus Cylinder as the first declaration of human rights, but historians consider this anachronistic. Cyrus was not declaring universal human rights for all people, but continuing a common legal tradition in the ancient Near East that spoke of reforms within his territory. In no way was he declaring all humans have certain rights. The Persians were still brutal to their enemies and considered many groups to be beneath them. The development of human rights still had a long way to go, and through the rise of Christianity, human rights became a reality for us today. This process really began with the Hebrew Scriptures. In the ancient world, one's rights and privileges often depended on the social class you were a part of. Those lower on the hierarchical structure would not have things like freedom of religion, speech, or freedom from torture and slavery. You belonged to someone and were beholden to certain demands they put on you. Metaphysically, humanity was viewed as a race of slaves whose main purpose was to serve the gods. Therefore, most people had a low view of humanity. The king was called the image of the gods, and all were meant to serve at his pleasure to keep the gods appeased. The nobility had special rights and privileges that those of the lower class lacked. In the Code of Hammurabi, a slave was given a harsher punishment, even if he committed the same crime as a nobleman. Aristotle later wrote, "From the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjugation, others for rule." However, within the Hebrew Scriptures we see a different picture emerge. Genesis opens with the...
So if you want to see why it's different in the Hebrew Bible, sign up to donate and you will get full access to that video this weekend.
Sick.
Sick indeed. Okay, super chats. Where was I? Oh yeah, we got a $50 one I wanted to do as well. These live streams are so educating and also incredibly hilarious. Very fun to watch. God bless you both. Oh, you're too kind, especially to Than. He sucks. Sorry, I couldn't help.
Thanks.
Whatever. Anyway, I wonder how Viced Rhino distinguishes between God of the Gaps argument, and a successful argument for theism. He can't answer. Good question. That'd be a great question for him.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like, again, as I said earlier, you're just going to call every argument for God of the Gaps. You're just assuming naturalism is true, and then therefore every piece of evidence for theism is a God of the Gaps because we already know naturalism is true.
Yeah.
What do you think of consciousness and religion in regard to what they are talking about in the telepathy tapes? Nonverbal autistic people having shared consciousness and regularly referencing God. I have not looked into that, but I will. I'm not going to dismiss it outright because I'm not an atheist naturalist. That's just wrong.
Can you email me whatever there is to know about this?
I'd like to look more into
inspiringphilosophy.com and Mike at inspiringphilosophy.com, and then put the subject line as telepathy tapes or something like that.
Don't do Mike. It's Michael.
Michael, sorry.
Any tips for retaining information when reading? I'm starting to get through some of the books recommendations on IP's website. Love your channel. As I said, best for me is I read a book, highlight, and then I go back and I check the highlights. That I go, oh, now I remember what this chapter was about. Now I remember this. So that's the best way, as I'd say. Do that kind of stuff for me. For Than, you gotta do something stupid.
Create.
See, that's extra work. You know, see what he's doing. Wrong way, that way. That guy doesn't know what he's doing.
Who's better looking though? Mike is. It's true.
Stop hitting on me. A to B. Does that not mean B is false if A is false? Does not follow that supernatural is true if something has a natural
A until
explanation.
B does not mean B is false if A is false. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Genuine question. How is the fine-tuning argument different from someone's 1,000 years of saying, we don't know the cause of lightning, the best is we have is God? Because the reason why it's different is because we have fine-tuning, and then we go, what is the best explanation of the fact that you have fine-tuning? We have natural causes. You could do physical necessity. You could do a multiverse. At the end of the day, what is most probable? So now you could make the case that maybe in the ancient world, they could do the same thing for lightning. But guess what? You update your arguments based on more knowledge that comes in. If more knowledge comes in and fine-tuning is physically necessary, we'll update then. Until the naturalist does that, we are still justified in making an inference to theism. I thought that's what we were supposed to do when it comes to science. But apparently we can't do that with theism or metaphysics. That wouldn't logically follow. So when more information comes in and they can show fine-tuning does not best explain by design, then we'll update. Sure, I have no problem.
Thousands of years ago, the inference line wasn't, we don't know the cause of lightning, the best to have is God. They like, this was like a big worldview thing. This wasn't like an argument for natural theology that was being made back then. And on top of that, the laws, like the fundamental laws of nature that teleological arguments are pointing to, are not the kinds of things that more fundamental entities are going to explain if they're naturalistic causes. And so lightning is going to be the type of thing that's going to have some sort of other contingent explanation. And the argument here is that more likely than not, these fundamental laws of nature are going to be things that are like the last pieces of contingent layers, if you're going to put it that way. And so there's huge relevant differences here too.
Zed Pfizer points out no philosopher/theologian has ever defended the claim everything that exists has a cause. And no, your youth pastor Bob doesn't count. That's good. How would a materialist explain placebo effect? Unless I misunderstand something, I feel like this isn't expected on that worldview. That's a good point. I've never thought about that, but I'll have to think more about that. It is weird how that sometimes actually works with certain people, like case studies, how the placebo effect has been almost miraculous in some ways. It's incredible the way that sort of works. But I'm not up to date on that.
I'm going to have to say that it depends on a case-to-case basis. Like the placebo effect is a real thing. But I wonder if the placebo effect, I'd have to ask Caleb this. I wonder if the placebo effect could be a good instance of like false negatives for miracle cases too. But yeah, I'd have to think some more.
Thoughts on movie God's Not Dead in the sequels? Well, I'm looking forward to the new ones coming out. The one they're working on now, 2 God, 2 Not Dead. Then there's God 8, Not Dead 9. These are gonna be great. Can't wait.
Wait, is that actually happening, Mike?
No, I'm spoofing Fast and Furious. Come on, fan. Get the cultural reference. You're gonna ruin the joke.
I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you for the generous super chat. We will spend more time on this one. Is the selection from a population view of Genesis 2:7 a viable view? Given that Genesis 7:15 and 22, where breath of life seems to mean physical life. I know that Adam is called dust, but what about 2:7b? Let me go to Genesis 2 and just read the verse. 7. Then the Lord God formed the man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. Is this selection? I don't think that's what's going on there. I don't think it's selection. Maybe that's a viable view. I need to see more. I think this is more about an election point of Adam becoming the priest in the garden. Now, you could argue this is a special creation of Adam, but I think Genesis 1 implies there's already humans out there that have the Imago Dei before Adam is brought into the picture. You can see my Genesis 1 to 11 series where I talk more about this topics. What are your thoughts, Than? Anything?
Yeah, I'm very undecided between. I mean, I lean towards de novo creation here, rather than special creation. I mean, sorry, I lean towards saying that Adam was elected here rather than like some sort of creation of Adam here. I don't know. I haven't thought about this stuff in a very long time. So
I don't think it's selection from population. I don't think that's what the ancient authors.
what does that mean?
Doing.
What does he mean by selection from population?
You know, like there's a population of humans, and Adam is elected to be a priest. I mean, I don't think that's what he's saying. I think I don't think he's talking about that per se. I think he's just talking about Adam becoming the priest and getting a new purpose in God. I think that's what the aim of the author is. You could imply that's what's happening, but I don't think that's the aim of the author. So maybe it's in the background of what the author's thinking. Who needs human rights when we have 1980s Russia?
The Russian spy speaks again, Mike.
That's a good point, Russian spy. I never thought of it like that. For the clip, also, Rogan has Chad Wright, a SEAL in ultra marathon runner, but they talked about Christianity, and Wright was sharing a ton of Calvinist perspective. All right, we'll take a look at that. Maybe we can review that or something down the road. Saying, how can God be in time if if time is created? He could enter into time. Just like he can enter into the world.
If you want to, that's too shiny. Ryan, make your books less shiny. Ryan Mullins, good friend of the channel, good friend of mine. Great book if you want to read on this topic. Here's one of the possible ways that you can think about that, though, is that if time is just a substance and that substance is grounded in God's nature or something like that, then it could just be the case that time actually wasn't created. And so, yeah, that's one way to look at it.
More realism is false than getting upset over your wife cheating on you is irrational, since that would be an appeal to emotion. That's a good point. Yeah. Well, you can't actually say she did anything wrong. All that's upset is she made an emotional reaction in you, which again doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just everything's emotion. But I think the Frege-Geach problem really destroys non-cognitive aspects. But see my video on non-cognitivism. You just search on YouTube "Inspiring Philosophy," non-cognitivism, you'll get the view. Have you guys read Quentin Smith's column, Cosmological Arguments for Atheism, published in Cambridge website? Yeah, yes. A long time ago, but I don't remember it.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. How do you explain personal dreams experiences that lead people to other religions like Mormonism and Islam?
Depends on the person.
Yeah, and yeah, we're not saying everything is supernatural. We're just saying there is. And of course, as you can have, false vision experiences. You see something in the corner of your eye and it turns out to be nothing. You can also have false aspects of the supernatural. Like, we're not saying everything is the case. Yeah. And also, even if they are, I mean, again, we do believe in the demonic. So that could be another way to explain it. I lean towards the idea that Muhammad did experience something in a cave, and it just wasn't from above. It was from below. So, but I mean, that's a whole other topic. Joel pointed out that the Levitical laws are prioritized over Deuteronomy. How should I categorize or prioritize the commandments of the Torah books? You don't. You're under the new covenant. Prioritize those commandments. You're not an ancient Israelite living in Canaan. So don't worry about it. There, problem solved. I don't know why you think you got to follow those. We follow the new covenant. Jesus fulfilled the old covenant. He upholds it perfectly, and our faith in him is how we establish it, as Romans 3:31 says. So 31 or maybe 30, one of those two verses. But yeah, that's how we establish the old covenant. So you prioritize Christ and his commandments. Be baptized, partake of the Eucharist, spread the Great Commission, believe in him.
Yep.
And there you go. Keep the virtues that Paul lays out, these kinds of things. Go to church.
We have a video on the channel too about understanding what the Old Testament law was actually for, like its purpose and everything like that. Yeah.
Misunderstood Mosaic law. Yeah. So
yes.
All right, that was our 50th super chat. Thank you, everybody. We're going to close this out. We'll be live again Monday. We have another video coming out tomorrow. Another failed attempt to defend Islam. Someone is trying to debunk the Islamic dilemma, and I show he fails in 5 minutes. So that video will be out tomorrow, and we'll be live again Monday for something.
Do we not have a plan for Monday?
No. We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll talk to Matt. Matt, we got to figure something out for Monday if you're listening. Matt. Dan, he doesn't hear me if you don't call him as well.
Matt!
There you go. See, now he hears. It's
All right,
got to be
sorry.
both of us.
I was looking through our chat to see if we have anything. Oh, the thing that in our in the boys chat Messenger.
Hold on. This super chat real quick. He was saying in that time, how do you prioritize? You would have prioritized Deuteronomy because that was the one that was given last, because the argument Joel was making is they couldn't keep the Levitical laws well. So God gave them Deuteronomy as like sort of a compromise version, and they would have prioritized that is what the argument would have been. But
Matt's saying we have something planned. Sorry, I thought you were done.
Matt's saying, okay. See, Matt works in mysterious ways. We have to, sometimes he just tells us things and we follow through. I don't know what's going on, but he's always working around us.
What do we have planned?
Well, I don't know, but Matt's got something planned. So Matt should be here Monday to help us do the planned stream on Monday. So yeah, let's close this out because I'm tired and hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry.
All right. Bye.
You made it to the end of this video, which means this message matters to you. If you want to see more content like this reaching people for Christ, you can help make it happen. Your support makes these videos possible. Click the link below and donate today. And if you want to go even deeper, consider joining our Patreon community. You'll get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and a place to connect with others passionate about this mission.